Hey guys, how are you all? Welcome back to my channel. Today we will see what if Naruto gets Karin pregnant. If you enjoy it then please like, share and do comments. Naruto woke up to the sound of birds chirping at the window case. He had not drawn the curtains of his room before going to bed, so as soon as he opened his eyes he was blinded by the sun rays. He blinked once, twice in order to accommodate his vision to the light. Few seconds later he felt better. A quick glance at bedstand watch told him it was noon already. He shrugged his shoulders. He'd never been the early type, this was the earliest he could get up, especially when he had nothing to do with his day. He stretched his long lean body before climbing out of bed to use the bathroom adjacent to his room, to take a bath. When he was done he started roaming in his cupboard for something proper to wear. He couldn't suppress a little shiver when he saw his clothes were neatly disposed. Tops and bottoms classified according to type, colors, and materials. No matter how many times he saw this perfect display of tidiness, the shabby guy he was, freaked out. It seemed very unnatural to him. Nevertheless, he tried all his best not to mess up the whole things off, even if he knew no one was going to blame him, because as much as he hated to admit it, having clean and well-ironed clothes at your disposal was a pure joy. He settled for a pair of blue jeans and a white shirt, quickly closing the cupboard before the shabby demon in him got bad intentions. Once he was fully dressed, he set for the kitchen, where he was welcomed by the scent of pork-flavored ramen which rose beyond that of citrus-flavored liquid soap. Indeed, on the sparkling kitchen counter was an enormous bowl of homemade ramen as appealing as ever. No need to say his mouth was now a waterfall. Kami-sama, this was definitely one sweet afternoon, again. The fact was, Naruto's life had taken an unexpected turn after that fateful night when he had rescued Karin. That had been 3 months ago. Karin had spent nearly a month in the hospital. Her body had been put through a lot of damage during the assault. Multiple fractures, even at places Naruto could have never imagined. Most of the time she floated between unconsciousness and delirium, flirting dangerously with death. Despite the medics' attempt to bring her back, her situation remained desperately unstable. Even Tsunade's skills had been put to test. As for her assailants, they had not been traced despite the clear description Naruto had made of each of them. They had disappeared from the surface of Earth like ghosts, aided by the reluctance of some of the people in charge of the case to find the culprits, as well as the lack of cooperation from the villagers to help arrest the people they said had punished one of their top-class enemies. When the story had gone round the village, majority of the people had approved of the act. Naruto had been sick to his guts when he heard people praising those filthy bastards as if they had done something heroic. But he knew that when the people of Konoha loved you, they brought you till the highest grounds, and when they hated you, they personally brought you to hell. Karin fell in the second category, and she had learnt the lesson the hard way. The suffering she had endured had been more than hell. Yet he couldn't do anything against it. All that was left to do was pray that she recovered, if not mentally at least physically. Naruto could not remember the last time he had prayed for someone like he had prayed for Karin. During the month when she was merely alive, he had stayed at her bedside. His heart threatened to stop when she almost embraced death, and beat with joy when her condition stabilized. He refused to leave her alone, fearing one of those who hated her could take advantage of her vulnerable condition to hurt her. He only went back to his apartment when changing clothes and taking a bath was really necessary. Even then he made sure Tsunade or Shizune were around. They were the only two people he trusted with her safety. He felt so tied and connected to Karin despite the fact they had barely known themselves before the accident. It's true they had crossed each other a couple of times, but they had merely exchanged words. But the protective feeling that had risen in him from the day he'd rescued her grew larger every day, because somehow she reminded him of him when he was a kid, maltreated and hated by all the villagers because of a crime he had not committed. Being the vessel of Kyuubi was enough to make him guilty in their eyes for the evil acts of the fox demon. At first sight Karin could be considered guilty, but what was one supposed to do when you were raised under the influence of an immoral person like Orochimaru, whose conception of evil and good was very mistaken? Was it a crime to struggle to survive in a world full of sufferings and horror? Admitted she had made the wrong choices. No one deserved that, not even bitches like Sakura. It was during this period that Naruto had vowed he'd always keep her safe from anybody who intended to hurt her. He'd be there for her. Just like Iruka-sensei and the third Hokage had stood up for him, even if it meant facing the disapproval of the rest of the village again. So when Karin had finally woken up, he had been there. helping her as much as he could to endure the physical injuries and regain a certain mental stability. She had clung to him as if he were her lifeline, depending on him for comfort and support during the first days when she felt so weak and miserable. Death was almost appealing. But as the days passed by, she slowly regained strength and courage, even if she still remained vulnerable. As Karin was trying to surface from the throes of mental agony the attack had sent her in, the council was busy trying to put her more down than she was already. Flashback. One morning 2 weeks after Karin's awakening, they were in her room in the recovery unit, when Tsunade barged into the room, a serious expression on her face. Naruto immediately figured out something was wrong. The tension he sensed in her body was sufficient to confirm his worries. "We have a problem," she said curtly before he had time to ask a question. A deep frown suddenly appeared on Naruto's forehead and his protective part surfaced, all claws out. "What is it?" he asked, anger starting to rise in his body. "The council is after Karin. From the first day she stepped in the village they've wanted her out. They insisted she should be sent to prison, which was done, so I thought the matter was settled. So after her sentence period was over and Kakashi found her a place to live and a job, I held no objection to that. But the council members were still growling in their breaths. It would have remained that way if not of the incident. They claimed Karin's desire for revenge could be a threat to the peace of the village. That's absurd. How can she be a threat to someone in this condition on top of having a jutsu-suppressing seal?" Naruto roared indignantly. "I know that, but the villagers don't, and the council is using their hatred and ignorance to pressure me. They want her either out of Konoha or dead. How can they be so heartless? They're just a bunch of old." "Naruto, please calm down." Karin intervened, resting one of her small hands on his arm, in an attempt to appease him. "They think they're doing what's good for the people. Though I'd like to say I'll never try to indulge into any violent act even if I could. I can swear on that, Hokage-sama. That was true." After seeing the consequences that came when one took the path of revenge and hatred, Karin had sworn to herself she will never go down there again. Even it meant suffering in silence. At least it was better than ending in jail or worse, half dead. "No need to, I know. If you'd wanted to attempt something it would have been a long time ago. They are aware of that. Still, their lust for revenge is blinding. You should know Orochimaru's and the Akatsuki's acts are still fresh in memories." Karin bent her head and nodded slightly. "In that case Karin shouldn't be the only person to pay for that," Naruto said in a bitter tone. "Sasuke did join Orochimaru's camp, the Akatsuki later, and turned against his own village. Yet he didn't go to jail, neither was he killed or exiled. Sasuke was a citizen of the village, Karin is not," Tsunade pointed out in a neutral tone. "That's not fair. The council is not always fair. In fact, life is not always fair. You should know best." A heavy silence fell on the room before Tsunade spoke again. "Karin, I've already made it clear no one is going to lay a finger on you. For the rest I'm not so sure, but all the same I'll see what I can do." "Thank you, Hokage-sama," Karin said in a little voice. "I've got paperwork to attend to, I'll have to leave," the older woman said. She grunted inaudible things in her breath, surely about how troublesome and boring paperwork could be, before going out. When she left the room, Naruto was literally boiling with rage. His already dark chakra became even more dangerous. Though Karin knew she had nothing to fear from him, she couldn't help but shiver. "Naruto, are you alright?" she asked hesitantly. "Don't worry, I'm fine. Take care of yourself, I'll be back soon. Trust me, you're not going anywhere." Karin barely nodded before he was at the door. The 3 days that followed, Karin didn't see Naruto. He didn't come to visit. He was very busy trying to figure out a solution to the problem. Reflection had never been his cup of tea, but past experiences had shown that when he gave it a serious try he came up with, if not brilliant, good ideas. On the 4th day Naruto had found the solution. It had taken him time, but he had finally found it. Thrilled like he'd never been before, he rushed to the hospital to tell Karin the good news. When he arrived, a nurse was going out of her room. Karin was sitting in the middle of her bed, head down, crying all her heart out. Within seconds Naruto was by her side and she threw herself in his arms, crying even more, leaving the blonde head more puzzled than ever. "What's wrong, Karin? You know you can tell me everything. I'm here for you," he assured in that soft voice he used to speak to her only. Yet Karin said nothing. She continued crying. "I know this entire situation must have taken a toll on you, but I can assure you it will soon be over. Karen's sobbing ceased for a moment. She slightly pulled away from him to look straight in his eyes. Her face looked tortured, especially with the tears streaming down her cheeks. Her crimson eyes looked in his with so much despair that his heart clenched. Before he could place a word, she cut him at the punch. "I am pregnant, Naruto," she choked out. "Since I woke up I've been feeling yucky and very exhausted. At first Tsunade-sama thought it was because of the treatment, but soon I started having cramps. So she said I should conduct a test just to be sure given the situation. It turned out to be positive. I'm pregnant," she said again as if she still couldn't believe it was happening. "I don't know what to do. I'm scared. I don't want to keep it, but at the same time I don't feel like getting rid of it. I'm so confused." Her voice broke and she started crying even harder. For a moment Naruto just held her silently as spilt her sorrow through the hot tears that wet his t-shirt. Truth been told, he had never considered the scenario while he had brought up his plan. This was so unexpected and confusing. Nevertheless, he knew what to do and he was more than determined to do it. He was a man, he never came back on his words, and he had promised Karin a solution. He raised a hand and placed the crimson tresses that felt limply on her small face behind her ears. He rubbed her cheeks soothingly as a confident smile split his lips. "I promised you I was going to help you through all this mess, and I'll do it. Nobody's going to send you away, and as for this, no matter what your decision is, I'll be there for you. We're going to get married." The last phrase is suspended in the air, letting its effect operate. Then Naruto went on unraveling his plans. "I went through the laws and legislation of our village these past 3 days. I never thought I'll read so many books in my life, but then I have no regrets. I came across this passage where they said once a foreigner married a citizen of Konoha, he or she was granted instant citizenship. So I thought to myself, if we got married then the council won't be able to send you away. If they did, I'll have to go with you. They can't afford that. First because I'm Kyuubi's vessel, and second because I saved the village from pain. My worth has been proven. Losing an asset like me, especially during these uncertain times, will be disastrous. They need me." Karin could not believe her ears. When Naruto had said he had a solution, she had not expected anything in particular, but this was outstandingly dumbfounding. Sure, she didn't want to get kicked out of Konoha, especially now. Yet she couldn't resolve herself to let him tie himself with her for the rest of his life because of his over-exaggerated sense of duty. She was crap, her life was a mess. How could she take him along on her way to hell, when he had been so good to her? Her conscience was going to judge her whole life through. "You can't do this. I can't let you ruin your existence," she argued, shaking her head frantically. "You've already done more for me than I could ever dream of in a whole lifetime. I'll always be grateful for that. But this is too much. This is no time to be scrupulous, Karin. If they exile you, where are you going to go? Both of us know you are a fighter, but presently you're not strong enough to face that. Besides, Orochimaru's and the Akatsuki's deeds don't only limit themselves to Konoha. They've done harm almost everywhere. You can't face the whole world alone." He marked a little pause to let his words sink in her brain. "Sure, you have your pride, there's no way I'm going to step on it. This marriage will be a convenient one. You won't have to fulfill any duty towards me, yet I'll always respect and take care of you. You'll always be able to count on me. What about you? What do you gain in exchange apart from a huge bunch of problems and an invasion in your private space? My sensing skills are still good, but I can't be a ninja anymore. Apart from that, what if you find the perfect girl and you can't get her because you're stuck with me? What if your ninja skills have never been at stake?" he declared vehemently. "I have no interest in them. I don't need to get anything in return, just knowing you're safe is okay for me. Furthermore, I don't ever think I could ever play the games of love. I've played once, gambled much and lost everything. However," he said in more gentle tone, "I don't know what the future holds, but something is sure. Whatever happens, I'll always be true and fair to you. If we part, it shall only be as friends." For a moment there was a thoughtful silence, and then Karin spoke. "I'll marry you. And I promise I'll try my best to be a good wife to you. But please promise me when you get tired of me you'll let me know. Promise." She fell into his securing arms once more, and for a first time for a very long time she felt the future won't be so dark. End of flashback. Afterwards, Naruto had informed Tsunade of their decision. Of course she had objected to it, arguing marriage was something serious which they didn't have to joke with. But faced with his determination, she had had no other option than to align to his wish. They had gotten married 2 days before Karin was discharged from the hospital. Iruka-sensei, who had fervently opposed their wedding, been Naruto's witness as for Karin. Kakashi-sensei had volunteered to fill the role, since he had somehow played the role of a guardian from her arrival. The council had stormed and protested, but as Naruto had predicted, they could hold no action against them. They needed him. He and Karin had settled in Naruto's apartment. Each of them had his room to preserve a certain intimacy. Though they were relatively comfortable with each other, Karin was still shy around him. He had promised her she didn't have to fulfill any duty towards him, and he meant it. He was not going to take advantage of the situation and use her for carnal release even under pressure. Nevertheless, 1 week after she had moved in, Naruto's dull apartment, which had been more of a pigsty than anything else, started taking colors and shape. The instant ramen had been thrown away in favor of fresh food. His clothes were almost always clean and tidy. The bathroom and the kitchen did not look suspicious anymore. The living room was appealing now that the couch was no more the cemetery for old sandwiches and instant ramen cups, and the carpet no more smelled like a wet dog. Finally, he had this feeling of well-being that warmed his chest on the rare occasions he saw her smile, even if it was rare and forced, most often on top of the feeling of having someone to say good morning and good night to. Someone who made him feel, even if it was no blazing fire, just feel again. True, there were more flat mates than a married couple, but Naruto had no regrets. In fact, he had to admit he loved life with Karin, his friend. Karin stared at her reflection in the mirror. Her face was so lean that her cheekbones looked incredibly big. Dark rings circled her eyes, which looked dull and lifeless. Her lips were so dry that they cracked. Her hair hung at the sides of her face, sleek and dull. Her face was so pale it was not far from the sickly gray complexion it had when she was still in the hospital. In fact, she looked like a mess. Lord, how she hated that word, but it always came back whatever she did to erase it from her life. Since she had gotten out the hospital and moved in with Naruto as his roommate, bride, she had started making efforts to get out of the nervous breakdown the assault had left her in. Instead of staying prostrated in her room playing the role of a victim, she had taken the bull by its horn, and fought her depression by keeping herself busy. Even if she couldn't make her mind to return to her job at the library, every morning she forced herself to get up, brush her teeth, take a bath, dress, and got started with whatsoever house chores she had planned the day before. Cleaning, dusting, washing, ironing, kept her mind from straying to the memories of that gruesome incident she tried to forget. At least during the day, because at night it was almost impossible to get rid of the nightmares that kept her awake. Incapable of finding sleep, she tossed and thrashed in her bed, trying to chase the images that raced like a kaleidoscope in her head, or she cried herself to sleep. She woke up the next day tired as ever. With a huge headache and shadows in her eyes she tried to ignore all day till the night came again. Sometimes it worked and sometimes not. Today was one of these days when the carrying on exercise was so tedious she hardly contained the urge to crumble down and break into tears. The day had started with the usual routine, waking up, preparing Naruto's breakfast. It was the least she could do to thank him for all what he had done for her. Also, it made her feel useful and warmed her frozen heart whenever she saw the smile that lit his face when he ate whatever thing she had cooked for him. Then had come the cleaning and dusting. Everything was going perfectly smooth till, in the course of starting lunch, she had launched to the bathroom, taken by a wave of nausea. After spending almost 20 minutes bent over the porcelain altar puking her guts out before she had nothing left in her stomach to throw out, Karin was more broke than ever. This morning's sickness was one case where the nightmare prolonged till daytime. A manifestation of one of the consequences of the assault she had been trying to ignore all through. But denial was no more possible as day by day she felt her body changing, though slightly, but changing still to accommodate the creature that had taken residence in her womb. Drawing a little bit of her energy as it occupied more space and endeavored to become a little more real. She needed to take a decision and take it fast before it was too late. Even if she had grown up in a world of misery and suffering, Karin had always hoped one day she'd get to emerge from that circle, start a new life, find the man of her dreams and have a family of her own. She had thought Sasuke will be that man, but he had proven later on to be part of the bad memories she will have to forget. Still, Karin had never given up on her secret dream, even at the times when it seemed so impossible to get to. The rape had put a crack in her illusions, but the discovery of her pregnancy had been like the bomb that had shattered them into unfixable pieces. Which man was going to marry her with such a gruesome baggage? Not only had the bastards raped her, but they had also gotten her pregnant, marking her body and soul for life. Karin could still remember her state of shock when the nurse who had conducted the test informed her it was positive. No matter how compassionate and soft-spoken the woman had been, Karin had felt her heart ripping apart. The pain and confusion had made her lost her mind for a short instant. That was when she had cried for the first time since her awakening. Even if she got rid of the thing before it had time to develop properly, she'd never be the same. She'd always bear that aching mark even if it didn't manifest physically, emotionally. Because despite the way how it had been conceived and the fact it was the reflection of the mess in her life, this creature still held a part of her. A part she wanted to deny with all her might, but she couldn't get herself to. Sure, she could not pretend to love it already. Yet she knew if she got rid of it, that act will torture her mind forever, even when she'd be old and senile. She'd done many evil things in the course of her life. People had suffered and died because of her, perhaps not directly, but she had done nothing to help them even when she had gotten a chance to, and she had never given a damn. All that in the name of survival. But right now she was no more certain she had made the right choices considering the path they had led her to. Perhaps what was happening to her right now was a fair punishment for her evil deeds, or the evil deeds she had consented to. All the same, she had to bear the consequences of her acts. Apparently going to prison after she'd almost died in the hands of her pseudo-savior was not enough to make amends for all the spilt blood. She also had to face this obstacle. How she wished she had died instead. Everything will have been so easy and less painful. Yeah, you would have been burning in hell instead. Definitely easy but painless? Not so sure, spoke a voice in her head. She just shook it off and resumed looking at her reflection in the mirror. No matter which angle she looked at, she still looked like a mess, a sort of living dead, the ghost of the Karin before the incident. Those guys had succeeded in breaking her down, they had won in all the sense of it. She was completely broke. This realization knocked down the ridges that kept her tears from flowing, and she burst into a ceaseless fit of tears. As the clear liquid streamed on her face, stained her glasses and hit the porcelain sink, her body shook uncontrollably. They flowed and flowed until she was just a wobbly mess. Never had she felt so miserable. This was even worse than the rape itself. She just hoped it stopped soon. Busy crying her heart out, Karin did not hear Naruto's alarmed calls, neither did she hear the bathroom door opening. It was only when she felt two secure arms round her shoulders she turned around. She didn't have the strength to pretend everything was okay. In fact, it was not an option, so she did what she craved most and lost herself into the comforting chest that awaited her open-heartedly as tears started flowing with doubled force. It was only moments later, when the tears relented, that Karin realized Naruto had taken her to her bedroom and she was lying against his chest. When he felt her relaxing, he sat up, taking her along with her. He withdrew a bundle of handkerchiefs from a box on the nightstand and started cleaning her face. Too weak to protest, Karin let him do. When her face was almost tidy, he drew her closer to his chest and held her without saying anything. "I'm sorry," Karin said apologetically. "I'm all right now, you can leave me alone." "I'll be fine," she said, pulling away from him. "All right," he said without moving an inch. "Naruto?" "Karin?" I said, "I'll be fine now." "You can. I heard, and I don't feel like going anywhere. I'm good here." "How can you be good anywhere around me? I'm a mess," she stated more matter-of-factly than anything. Naruto shifted a little in order to face her. His clear cerulean eyes bore in her faded crimson ones as he spoke to her. "I don't know where you got that idea, and I don't want to. I may have known you for the past 3 months only, but what I can say is you're someone fighting to get over a life-traumatizing experience with a strength and dignity I've rarely seen in anyone. Yes, sometimes you break down, but soon after you try to stand on your 2 feet. You're a fighter, not a mess. I've known myself for a longer period you have, and I know what I am. I don't think so, because I just told you what you were and you refused to admit it. Perhaps because that way you get to avoid facing reality and embrace self-pity. But I can't let you do that." Karin abruptly pushed away from him, irritated by his remark, which had true note in it. "Since when do you assume the role of my psychoanalyst? I don't remember paying you to assume that role. Perhaps you think saving my life gave you the right to intrude in my affairs, huh? I'm just trying to help you. Do I seem to need it?" Karin shouted furiously. "Yes you do," Naruto pointed out calmly. They were both silent for a moment before Karin spoke back again. "I really think you should go now," she said, trying to keep her cool. Finding no reason to insist, Naruto just nodded and took for the door. He was halfway out when he turned around to speak again. Try to have some sleep now, you need it, you look exhausted. Karin just stared at him bewildered. They'd just had an argument and the guy was still sweet to her. What kind of specimen was he? She didn't want to think about it though. She nodded slightly just for him to leave before she got more confused than she was already. With that, Naruto walked out, silently closing the door behind him. Once he was out of sight, Karin turned around to face the window through which she could see birds chirping happily and freely, indifferent to the turmoil in her heart. She caught herself wishing she could be happy again just like them. Even if her life had always been a mess, there had been times, even short ones, when she had been really happy, almost blissful. You could if you wanted to, the voice she thought of as her conscience said softly. How can it be possible? She questioned loudly, I feel so lost and miserable. Then as an answer to her question, Naruto's voice rose in her mind. You're a fighter, not a mess. She turned her face from the birds and set her gaze to the ceiling. How she wished she got better. Eventually her vision blurred and she drifted to sleep. When Karin woke up, it was morning again. She sat up in her bed, surprised to find herself still dressed in the same black dress she had been wearing the day before. It clung to her damp body uncomfortably. She had slept for so long she felt a little dizzy when she attempted to get out of bed. It had been a while since she had slept almost peacefully. That's when she realized all this time she had really been exhausted, but she was always scared to drift to sleep because of the nightmares. And during the day she worked herself like a slave. In addition to that, her present condition didn't help either. How she'd managed to put up for the past 1.5 months was a mystery. But now she was determined to put an end to that. Naruto was right when he'd said she had been avoiding reality in order to embrace self-pity. All this while she had thought she was on the way of healing, but after their confrontation, she had to admit somehow, she'd been playing the role of the victim. True, what she had experienced was hard, but she was letting herself fall apart. She was letting those rogues have the better of her. Up till now she had faced all what had come her way with strength and courage, refusing to linger in despair. Never had she been trapped so long in fear of tomorrow. Never before had she given up the will to survive. Death had never crossed her mind before, even through the darkest times. So how had she come to even think about it as a solution? How had she think of reducing all the efforts she had made to achieve her dreams be shattered so easily? She had experienced loneliness, rejection, death, humiliation, ostracism, and she had gotten over all that with a fury to live stronger than ever. That meant she could also get over this. Coming to think of it, those bastards had not done anything to her. Orochimaru and Sasuke had not done before them, i.e. waited when she was vulnerable to use and dump her almost dead. The only difference was that she had seen the evil in them from the start, so what they had done to her was not much of a surprise. They had not lured her into fake love or played with her feelings, they just raped her, she thought to herself in a mixture of cynicism and auto-derision. Fine, they had won the first round, but she was going to win the battle. Perhaps she was not going to marry the man of her life or have the dream family she'd always dreamt of, but it didn't matter. She had the husband. Even if he did not love her, he was caring and supportive. He respected her too, and he had no evil intentions concerning her. As for the rest, well, she had the kid on the way. She wasn't still sure she will be able to raise it up with all the love a child deserved given the circumstances under which it had been conceived, but she knew already she was not ready to get rid of it. Somewhere deep within her heart she knew she could even come to love it with time. But most of all, she was never going to be a victim again. From now on she was going to stop carrying on. She was going to start living again, whatever it meant. It was going to be difficult, but this was her new goal in life, and she was going to achieve it by professing strength and dignity. After all, she was a fighter. Encouraged by all these resolutions, Karin marched to her cupboard. Most of her clothes were still packed in the bags she and Naruto had put them when she had moved out of her former apartment. The time had come for them to see the light again, because that was definitely what she was marching to. 30 minutes later, Karin was in the kitchen making breakfast when Naruto emerged from his bedroom. "Hi," he said as he sat on a stool near the counter. Karin started up, taken off guard by his sudden appearance. Hi. I didn't hear you coming. Sorry I scared you, it was not my intention," he simply said. Karin took in a deep breath and turned around to face him. He sat, one hand resting lazily on the counter while his beautiful eyes were fixed on her. As usual, his blonde hair stood in spikes on the top of his head. He wore a blue shirt over a black tank top, and she was almost sure he wore a pair of jeans. Karin couldn't help but smile inwardly as she thought of how good-looking he looked in those clothes. Really, she could have fallen worse. Talking about intentions. I'm sorry about yesterday, I didn't mean to start a fight. I felt miserable and a little picky and your words hit me on a sensitive spot. No, it was my fault. I shouldn't have been so rude. You were not rude, you were right on all the line. For the past month I've been letting myself fall apart. I let that incident take a toll on me more than it should. That's because healing takes time, especially when you have important decisions to make. Nobody expects you to be fine just straight away, especially me. I know that, but all the same time is passing and I can't always stay in the past when the future is still uncertain. I think it's about time I started moving on. I can't pretend I know what you are going through. That will be making a mockery of your pain and torment. What I know is I trust you to take the right decision, and furthermore I trust you to get over all this, if not now, someday. Because as I said earlier, you are a fighter and not a mess. Thank you, she whispered in a little voice overwhelmed by his tirade. Even when she had been in the best of her moods, she had never felt so much assurance despite what she made people believe. To know Naruto had so much confidence in her, it brought tears to her eyes. There's no need to, it's free, he replied with a little smile. Others always want something in return, she said bitterly. Others don't matter now. What matters now is you getting well soon. And I'm going to get well soon. Naruto looked at her for some moment. Despite the dark rings that still circled her eyes and her sickly pallor, something in her had changed. Perhaps was it the fact her hair no longer fell dully on the sides of her face like rags. She had combed them and they fell backwards in glossy crimson tresses held by a black hair band. She no longer wore one of those horrible shapeless dresses she'd been wearing these part days. Instead, she had put on a pair of skinny jeans with slits over the knee and a green checkered shirt. Her plump pink lips were coated by a thin layer of lip balm. He could see the beauty he'd always thought she possessed surfacing. And when he looked into her eyes, he saw the combative gleam which he had seen in her eyes on the first day. Karin's pride did not allow her to seat back and cry all her misery, and that was one thing he admired in her. At this moment he knew the fighter was back and he couldn't help but smile. He was definitely going to like this new Karin. Nevertheless, he sensed this was not the only change that was going to operate. Before he could raise a question, Karin was talking again. Have you changed your mind about housing a third person? No, he answered cautiously, not knowing where she was heading to. She took another deep breath, quivering breath, before saying anything. It's good because I've decided to keep it, the baby, she said with a little sense of humor. I guess we'll have to create more space, he said in the same light tone. She replied with a subtle shrug of shoulders. Sensing it had taken more courage than she showed to take this decision and voice it out loud, he came closer to her and drew in an affectionate hug. You're not alone. We'll get through this, together. Everything will work out fine, he whispered softly in her ear. I know, I'm a fighter. As the words left her mouth, Karin knew she thought them. Things were going to get better in time. As long as she had Naruto by her side, she could face the whole world. He made her a fighter. Karin stood in front of the huge mirror that was placed at a corner of her room. She had brought it from her apartment. Some weeks back, with Naruto's help, she had unpacked the boxes he had brought from her apartment. Karin had not registered the amount of things Naruto had packed till that day. To say he had packed almost her whole house was an understatement. True, she didn't have that much furniture, yet it seemed too much, especially given the little time they had disposed of. When she had voiced her astonishment, Naruto had just scratched her head and a goofy smile had splayed his lips when he had admitted using clones to pack as much as he could because he didn't know what to keep and what to leave. Karin recognized he'd done his best given the fact she'd given him no help. During that period she was still on the border between consciousness and unconsciousness. Nevertheless, they'd done the selection together, displaying some of her stuff in the various rooms of the apartment, and to Karin's great surprise everything fitted perfectly as if they had been meant to be that way. Despite his sunny and exuberating nature, Naruto kept his deco simple, so Karin's sober but feminine furniture enlightened the austere and masculine apartment. The result was good-looking and welcoming, just like Naruto. Each day that passed, Karin became more and more convinced that she could have found no better husband than Naruto given the circumstances. Every day she discovered one aspect of his character that pleasantly surprised her. As a matter of fact, surprise was the word that seemed to always come back where Naruto was concerned. According to what Sasuke used to tell her, the idea of Naruto she had was that of a blonde, short, chubby, loud, naive boy, with limited intelligence and a predisposition to always get himself into trouble. Now she knew him better, she found out that all of this was fundamentally wrong. On the outside Naruto seemed to suit that description, but when you got closer you were confronted with another truth. Naruto was one of the most sensitive and kindest persons she had ever met. He was incapable of deceit and selfishness. He might seem naive, but he was very aware of the perfidy and wickedness of men, though he did not allow it to affect his judgment. He gave everybody he found worthy a chance regardless of who they were. He didn't sweeten the truth to please, but he didn't depict an awful picture of reality either. He called a cat and voiced his opinion loud, but he was not just a loud mouth. The term seemed pejorative. Karin preferred to think of him as a straightforward person. A little bit passionate at times, but passion could not be considered a flaw when it was justified. As for his supposed limited capacities, Naruto was not that thick, he was just too impulsive. The plan he'd come up with to save her from the hands of the council was a good example of what he could do when he gave reflection a try. As for his physical appearance, Karin had nothing to complain about. Naruto was by far one of the wildest guys she'd ever met. He was tall, lean from his face till his body, but that didn't conceal he had perfectly toned muscles where they were required. She'd gotten a glimpse of his tight abs once, and she could testify there was no extra flesh or fat tissue on that washboard abdomen. Apart from having a perfect body, he had the matching face, deep-catching cerulean eyes, lips meant only to be kissed, and blonde spikes that shone like his sunny personality. Even the whisker marks on his face were why. Not to mention the enormous amount of dark chakra that radiated from his body. Yes, in many ways Naruto was the perfect man, and she was very lucky to have him, though right now she still didn't seem to realize the exact measure of his worth. But Karin knew below that cover there was someone incredibly hurt and tormented. Though he put on the sunny boy mask most of the time, she knew he had wounds inside that were still bleeding and hurting. His affair with Sakura was no secret to Karin. It was of public knowledge that he'd loved her from childhood and that she had dumped him in favor of Sasuke. Though he feigned indifference, Karin knew that betrayal had hurt him more than he let show. At times she perceived shadows in his eyes, especially in those moments he thought he was alone and nobody saw. Those moments she forgot her own pain, and she felt so connected to him that she wished she could take him in her arms and cuddle him till he felt better. She wished she could help him exorcise the demons from his past and help him move on the way he helped her, too. But how could she do that when she could barely help herself? How could she help him when he kept her at a safe distance from him, even when he was sweet and caring? He eluded intimate questions, by answering them evasively or changing the topic with a dexterity he must have acquired with a lot of practice. When he'd done that, she'd understood his childhood too had been far from happy, perhaps because he was the Jinchuriki of the demon that had almost destroyed the entirety of Konoha 21 years ago. Having been a victim of the resentment of the villagers, she could imagine what it should have been like, especially for the little orphaned boy he must have been. Karin was cut out of her reflections by the sound of knocking at the door. She started up as her mind assessed she was still in front of her mirror, half-dressed. She was looking for something fitting to wear, but it was getting a little bit difficult. Her tummy had grown a little bigger over the last month. It was no more so flat but round and taut. It could have passed unnoticed otherwise if not of the fact she'd lost a little weight and she was all bones, so the slightest bump seemed over-exaggerated. Though she knew it should be the least of her concerns at the moment, and she could be considered vain, Karin couldn't help but feel self-conscious, especially when she lived with a cutie like Naruto. When she stood next to him she felt awkward and shapeless. Though he was kind and gentle, she could see he was insensible to her looks, and that stung a little. When had she fallen from the status of hot chick to that of scarecrow? The bump, as she called it, was definitely not helping her. "Karin?" Naruto's voice rose from behind the door. "Minute please. That will make 31 minutes, Naruto said as if he was consulting a watch, impatience clearly leaking in his voice. "I'm almost dying." Karin could not resent him for that. He had come back from the training grounds an hour before. Since then he had not had a meal. They should have been dining, but in the course of fixing dinner Karin had stained her gown and she had wanted to change before the meal. That was 30 minutes ago. Naruto being the gentleman he was, refused to start when she was not around. "I'm coming," she repeated, putting a dress hastily. "Come quick because Naruto's sentence remained in suspense as Karin opened the door. "Here am I, why don't you eat me, you big bad wolf?" she yelled, irritated. Naruto didn't respond as his eyes were glued to her bosom. She had surely put her dress in haste because she had omitted to close some buttons, and a lacy fabric of her pink bra escaped from her cleavage, revealing more pale skin than necessary for his mental stability. Karin furrowed her eyebrows as she saw the drowsy expression on his face. There's a piece of. It was just a joke," she scolded. But then her eyes caught his gaze and a deep flush spread from her cheeks to her collarbone and down to her breasts as she gasped, petrified. Naruto started up, emerging from his lethargy. Realizing what had just happened, a big swear escaped from his mouth. "Damn, Karin, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to be rude. She stuttered, short of words. Sorry. Really sorry." Instinctively she turned on her heels and slammed the door at his nose. "Damn," he growled, looking at the closed door. "Fuck." With that he turned his heels. Karin stayed leaning against the door, listening to Naruto's step sounds dying in the corridor as her heart beat like an African drum. Her whole body trembled at the memory of what had just happened a few moments ago. The look in Naruto's eyes when he'd looked at her cleavage had been far from disgusted by the bite marks that patterned her neck till the top of her breasts. It hadn't been innocent either. Gleams of lust and desire had fired his usually cool cerulean eyes. If she'd reacted so excessively, it was because she had been taken aback to see such a primal desire in his eyes, and moreover, because she had liked the feeling it had given to her. She had almost forgotten what it felt like to feel wanted, and for a moment she had been startled to realize she still loved the feeling despite what had happened to her. She'd been freaked by her own feelings, freaked by the fact that for one infinitesimal moment she'd wanted Naruto not just looking but touching. And she had felt disappointed when he had not. Gosh, she was getting overreactive and hypersensitive because of the hormones, nothing else. Perhaps Naruto had not even lusted over her, perhaps it was just a fruit of her imagination. In that case, how did she get to face him without feeling embarrassed by her behavior? How was she going to deal with crazy hormones of hers? Calm down, Karin, she admonished herself. What just happened is something natural. It happens when two people of the opposite get attracted to each other as a result of 2 months cohabitation. You don't need to get worked up for nothing. Breathe and take back your cool. You're a fighter, you can face this. She took 2 deep breaths before opening the door, making sure she had readjusted her place before going out this time. With determined steps she marched towards the corridor. Naruto was pacing in the living room like a lion in a cage. Damn, he kept up repeating. What had just happened should have never been. He was supposed to have Karin's trust. She was supposed to see him as her rock, her hero. And the only thing good he found to do was drool in front of a little piece of creamy skin and lacy bra. For God's sake, he was not a little boy, he should have better control over himself. He'd seen women's garments and nudity an uncountable number of times before. When he dated Sakura, he'd had the opportunity to see her half naked like 100 times. He'd even seen Karin totally naked, in fact he had undressed her. So that small piece of lace and some millimeters of skin should have had no effect on him. But damn it had. This should be a case of advanced UAL frustration. But damn it, he was a man and sometimes he was subject to primal carnal needs. He'd assured Karin he was never going to compel her to satisfy his carnal urges, and he had meant it. The only problem was he had not taken account of the fact that leaving with her in such proximity was going to generate an attraction he could not control. For some time now he had started feeling attracted towards his roommate, wife. First, she was a very beautiful woman with her long crimson hair, her plump pink lips and her crimson eyes. Though she was very thin, skinny, there was something fragile about her which sprung his protective instinct. And the changes her pregnancy operated on her body didn't aid his peace of mind. Her breasts were getting bigger, her hips broadened, making her feminine and awesomely attractive. He caught himself wishing he could cuddle her against his chest, breath and the scent of her hair, taste those tempting lips of hers. Kami-sama. He had to stop thinking of this kind of things. Karin was still fragile because of her misfortune. Even if she yielded to him, it would be more because of confusion than anything. He couldn't take advantage of her weak emotional state to get UAL satisfaction. Even if the thought of her kept her awake all night with a painful hard-on, a cold shower could not suppress. There was no way he was going to baffle his marriage vows, even if it was one of convenience, and there was no way he was coming back on his word to Karin. That would make him lesser than the rogues who had initiated this situation. Right now he'd better come up with a story to explain his shameful behavior before she thought he was not different from them. And this time around his brain better work fast. He quickly spun around and marched towards the corridor, determined to set things clear. At the same moment Karin was resolutely marching towards him, so inevitably they bumped into each other. "Sorry," they exclaimed at the same time. "Aye, you first," he said. "No, you. Of course not, go ahead. It's okay." "Fine," he cut, getting irritated by all this courtesy. "I'm sorry for the way I embarrassed you, it wasn't my intention." "I know, and I'm sorry because I was been overreactive. It's normal, I can understand. After what you've been through. Naruto, don't worry, I'm not judging you. I just want to assure you I don't have such intentions towards you. I'll rather kill myself instead." Even if his words were meant to reassure her, they made the effect of a cold bucket of water to Karin. True enough, it had been an embarrassing and awkward moment, but she had also felt flattered by his desire for her. In fact, she had planned to tell him that it was nothing to fuss about, since she felt a little bit the same. It was just as good she had not spoken first. How stupid she would have looked right now. "It's okay, I don't think we'll need to get to that," she joked half-heartedly. "I hope not. I think we could have dinner now," she said quickly. Okay. Didn't you have something to tell me?" He emphasized, irritating Karin a little more. "No, forget about it," she cut a little too dryly. "Fine," he replied, puzzled by her sudden change in behavior, but said nothing. They took dinner in silence, still feeling a little bit uneasy. When Naruto proposed to wash the dishes, Karin did not insist. Instead, she performed a strategic retreat to her room for the night, pretending she was a little bit tired. As she left, Naruto let out a little swear. Now that his desire had been lightened, he was going to have a hard time repressing it. Throughout the meal he had found it difficult to look at her without thinking of her half-naked breast. He feared even an anodyne action like passing her salt would betray his turmoil. If he felt this hot already, what were the next months going to look like? Not to talk about the next years. He was going to be a man and stay strong. From now on he will train more and perhaps accept a couple of missions to ease this UAL tension, and if it was not enough then he'd pray death take him quick. Because he doubted he could ever stop feeling attracted to Karin. Heavens help him, he was lusting over his wife. Life went on normally in the Uzumaki household. After the bra incident, as Naruto called it in his head, Karin had become a little shyer around him. Sometimes he caught her looking at him in a way that left him perplexed, but she just started up and blushed before quickly turning her head away. At those moments Naruto couldn't help but think he wasn't the only suffering from the overwhelming attraction that made his imagination go wild whenever she was near him. Even 2 weeks later he still thought of her incredible cleavage and her pale skin, that even the deepest scars and bite marks could not ruin. Sometimes he even went as to imagine what lay further, and when he woke up from those dreams he was usually wet and sweaty. This uncontrollable desire was the reason why he spent less time at home and more time on training grounds. He'd even taken 2 C-rank missions the week before. Even if they had not extended up to 24 hours, at least they prevented him from staying at home all day and left his mind at peace because he loathed leaving Karin alone. Though he knew no one could ever venture to his house to do her harm, one was never too sure. It could have been easier if she stayed in a friend's house while he was away, but Karin was far from having friends. He could have left her under the care of Iruka-sensei or Kakashi-sensei, but they weren't that close. Besides, Iruka-sensei, who had assumed the role of his foster father over the years, had not been very pleased by his new daughter-in-law. Her historical baggage was too much for him to ignore. As for Kakashi, well, he was distant and perverse. There was no way he left her alone with him. Definitely no way. Right now he was just coming back from the training grounds, exhausted enough for his mind not to deviate to wild ideas. At least he hoped so. As he opened the door he was welcomed by the vision of Karin on her knees scrubbing the floor, her back turned on him, giving him a perfect view of her perfect butt. Kami-sama, this woman really wanted his death. "Hello, I'm back," he exclaimed louder than he should have. Taken aback, Karin rose to her feet so suddenly she slipped on the soapy floor. Luckily lust had not completely consumed Naruto's instincts, because in few seconds he was already by her side. Karin found herself placated to his strong body before she touched the ground. Her heaving breasts pressed against his strong chest, as their mouths were just few inches apart. The slightest motion and they were going to kiss each other. This proximity was so troubling Naruto found himself blushing. "I don't think it's the moment to do gymnastics," he joked, trying to conceal his embarrassment. "Right," she acquiesced, still not making any movement. "I think you'll be safe on your feet now," he said, slowly pushing her away. "Yes, thank you," she said, her cheeks redder than overripe tomatoes. Naruto thought she looked very much like a schoolgirl at this moment, young and delicious. He was always surprised when he saw her blush. He couldn't help but think despite everything she'd been through she had still kept a touch of innocence. He found it cute and arousing. Actually, what aspect of her didn't arouse her? "So what were you doing?" he asked, making a fool of himself. I was mopping the floor," she said, looking at him with an expression which said, "Isn't it obvious?" "Of course," he assented, scratching the back of his head and laughing sheepishly. Suddenly his expression became more serious. "Don't you get bored of doing that every day? I mean, you never go out. Not even for shopping. If I were in your shoes I'll have gone mad a long time ago. Luckily for us I'm not you. I still have all my reasoning capacities, as you must have noticed. Don't worry, I'm okay. So how was your training today?" she asked, wishing to change the subject, forgetting Naruto was stubborn when he had something on his mind. "You can't get away so easily, Karin. This is a serious matter. You can't stay locked in this house forever. You need to go out, breathe some fresh air." "I had not realized the doors were locked and the house lacked oxygen," she replied sardonically. "Ha ha, you got me there," he replied in the same tone. "Don't play smart with me, you know exactly what I'm talking about." "True, you don't seem insane, still the same your attitude, it's not sane either," he said in a hard voice. "I don't see what's wrong if I don't want to go out." Karin snapped obstinately. "I do. I know you also want to, but you're just too scared." "I'm not," she flashed. "Yes you are." "No. Fine. In that case you'll have no objection if I suggested we went for a little walk," he mocked. A walk," she stuttered, all of her confidence suddenly vanished. "Yeah, a walk," Naruto repeated, unmoved. I'm scared," he completed sarcastically. "No," Karin fiercely objected, irritated by his perspicacity. "I was just going to say I'm a little tired." "Alright, but you still have enough energy to scrub the floor." He raised an eyebrow, looking in the direction of the bucket and soap some feet away from her. Karin couldn't help it when her face reddened. You're going to finish whatever you're doing while I take a bath. When I get back we're going out," he said in a tone that suffered no discussion. With that he turned his back and headed for the bathroom. "You can't force me to go out if I don't want to," she argued, just for sake of it, but her dare me look that sent to ashes the little resistance she had. 30 minutes later, when Naruto came back to the living room, it was sparkling as it usually was after the passage of Karin and her cleaning paraphernalia. But of the latter there was no sign. He felt impatience growing in him and was about to storm to her room when she just emerged in the corridor, a tortured expression on her face, yet she was still there. She had obviously changed her clothes. Of the wet and soiled clothes there were no traces. At their place were a pair of black denim trousers and an oversized t-shirt that concealed her little tummy. A little boyish and effortless for such a feminine figure, he thought, but made no remark. By dressing this way Karin manifested her rebellion and her resentment. He was ready to bet for 1 second she had thought of going out with the gown she was wearing before, but being the neat freak she was, she had abandoned the idea. He smirked as he saw the small pout that curled her mouth in such a manner. She may still be shy for the moment, but her attitude clearly portrayed her hot-tempered nature buried somewhere in her. No doubt when she became herself again he was going to have a hard time handling her so easily. He couldn't wait till then. Karin watched as Naruto assessed her clothing, half embarrassed and irritated. She had made no effort in her clothes to make him understand she was only accepting this because he had forced her to. If she had not had a problem with untidiness since the incident, she would have certainly left her previous dress. But the soapy water stains on it had discouraged her. Knowing how he took all his time with his bath, she had even taken a quick shower herself, to remove the thin film of sweat that clung on her body, and got dressed at the speed of light, fearing if she took too long he was going to barge into her room looking for her. Karin thought Naruto was too much of a gentleman to do that, but she also suspected she didn't know all the aspects of his personality. All this while he had been babying her, and he'd obviously decided now it was time to push her around. She wasn't very sure she wanted to know how far he could push her. "Let's go," Naruto's voice broke in the silence. He walked towards the door and paused to let her go out first. Karen's hesitation lasted 1 second before she inhaled deeply and did what he expected of her. As she crossed the doorstep and headed for the stairs, her heart started beating faster, but when they got out of the building, she was a taut ball of nerves. Naruto's building was in quarter very isolated from town. It was very near to the woods. There was little, not to say no, sign of humanity. Karin had always suspected they lived alone in the whole building, and she was very tempted to affirm she was right. The first breath of pure air that hit her face was so refreshing and reviving. Karin almost felt like coughing for her lungs to reaccommodate themselves to this. And the sunrays were blinding. She stopped a minute like an animal afraid of the going out of his cage after a very long captivity. She felt a little disoriented and awkward. What was she to do? Where were they going anyway? She hoped they were not going to go as far as town. As if he had sensed her worries, Naruto put a soothing hand on her shoulders and spoke softly in her ears. "Don't worry, we're just going to walk around till you get tired." Put a smile on, he beamed. "I'm sure you'll like exploring the woods with me. Relax, okay?" Given that she seemed to have been withdrawn the power of speech, Karin just nodded. They started strolling, heading to nowhere in particular. Karin was still a little uneasy, as if she were afraid someone would emerge from nowhere and assault them. But Naruto's carefree attitude broke down her inhibitions and she started enjoying. She inhaled a deep gulp of fresh air and she agreed Naruto was right. Since she had moved in with him, she had never left the safety of the apartment to venture outside. She feared as soon as she put her house outside, 3 rogues would be waiting at the door to have their way with her, or Enbu ninjas sent by the council will arrest her to bring her wherever they would have been instructed to. Also, given that she was used to hideouts and underground life, it was not that tedious. But whenever the feel to communicate with nature became so strong she could not repress it, she often passed a lot of time by the window looking outside instead of leaving the apartment. Now she had to admit being outside was different. Everything was more vivid and real. The colors seemed sharper, the scents stronger, and the noises louder. Indeed, it was a good feeling being out. Perhaps the fact there was no one else around apart from the two of them made her feel safe and free. She loved everything from the tall trees surrounding the neighborhood, the chirping of birds, and the squirrels that ran here and there. Everything was so marvelous. How had she managed to stay away from all this for so long? They had been silently walking for about 30 minutes when Naruto turned towards Karin, a broad smile splitting his lips. "It's good being out, right?" he questioned with a gentle smile. "Yeah," Karin replied, smiling too. "Thank you for bringing me here." Quote, "There's nothing to thank me about," he said, waving a hand. "It's normal. I promised you I was going to take care of you. Even if it entails doing it against your own will, I'm going to do it." "I'd noticed that," she murmured half-heartedly. He smiled at her and she smiled back. They lingered in a comfortable silence, enjoying the landscape. Suddenly Karin's pace began to slow down and a strange expression crossed her face. "Are you all right?" Naruto asked, worry clearly perceiving in his voice. "Yeah, don't worry, I'm okay." Her voice trailed as her head started spinning and her vision blurred. "Slowly. Take it easy," Naruto urged as he scooped her in his hands. "I think we've done a lot of trekking for today, we're going back home." Karin wanted to protest, but she suddenly felt too weak to utter the least sound. When they reached the apartment, Naruto laid her on the couch and propped cushions under her legs before escaping to the kitchen to fetch a glass of cold water. He helped her swallow the clear liquid before lying her down on the couch again. "Are you feeling better?" he inquired softly. "Yes, thank you. I'm really sorry I ruined our outing," she said in a pathetic tone. "It's all right, I should have guessed you were already tired. You're no medium or sorcerer," she joked. "And you're no superwoman," he highlighted a little dryly. Karin sensed this comment was just the interlude to a topic she wouldn't like. She was right, she discovered as Naruto spoke. "Karin, I've wanted to ask you this for some time now. You cook, tidy, dust, wash and mend all day long. I have nothing to complain about. The apartment is more beautiful than it has ever been, and I really appreciate having tidy clothes to wear at my disposal and marvelous meals, but are you supposed to do that? I mean, in your state." "What do you mean?" Karin asked, feigning not to understand where he was heading to. "I can't affirm I'm an expert in maternity issues, but I'm almost sure at this stage, you're not supposed to overexert yourself." "And at what stage do you think I am?" she asked defensively, mainly because this topic made her uneasy. Naruto furrowed his eyebrows, looking at her belly, which softly protruded through her tea. She should be around 4 months pregnant if his calculations were not mistaken. 4 months? 4 months 1 week, actually, she rectified. All the same I think it's far enough. I can't deny you're very energetic most of the time, but you've not consulted a medic to see you through your pregnancy. Hokage-sama must have guessed I decided to keep the baby by now, she insisted stubbornly, knowing he was definitely right. You need to know if everything is going well. I don't feel weird, so everything must be fine, she replied, still adamant to her point of view. Yeah, that's why you almost fainted some minutes ago. Or perhaps you were just trying to verify if I was strong enough to carry you when you'll be so big you won't be able to walk around the house so easily, and that lacing your shoes and even sitting down won't be an easy task. I don't wear shoes that require laces, pointed out with bile in her tone. That is not the issue at stake. You can't go on pretending you're not pregnant. He cried, feeling his irritation grow an inch. I don't know if you've realized it, but you can't enter in most of your genes anymore. You tire easily. Don't argue because your little demonstration few minutes ago was very eloquent. Not to talk about the morning sickness. You need to consult a specialist in order to know if what you're experiencing is normal or not, and to avoid these type of inconveniences in the future. He paused a moment to assess her reaction. Karin was mute. Up till now she had not realized Naruto noticed all these changes. She had never complained about anything around him, or just complained at all. At least if she had any complaints she didn't voice them, not even to herself. Also, though she had decided to keep the baby, she had not yet realized it was definitely real and part of her actual life. In fact, she didn't want to confront that sad truth just now. It was too hard. Tears started brimming in her eyes. Hey, don't cry, Naruto protested, horrified. Gosh, what have I done? He exclaimed, drawing her close to his solid chest. My intention was not to upset you. I don't know if I'm strong enough to face this after all. I don't know if I'll be able to make that step. When you decided to keep the baby, you proved that you were stronger than anything which could come your way. That was the first step and the biggest you could have possibly made. I have the certitude you'll be able to face this too. It will be child's play. But if you ever falter, I'll be there not too far to help you on your feet again. When she had calmed down enough to regain her sense of speech, Karin pushed away from Naruto. Thank you. I don't know where I'll have been if I didn't have you by my side. You will have done exactly what you were doing before you knew me. You would have survived. You're a fighter, remember, and you will get through all this. But first promise me you're going to stop crying, it scares the hell out of me. Karin shook her head incredulously. I don't know something that can scare you. Nevertheless, I promise I'll try, she agreed, laughing softly. As Naruto watched her laugh, he felt something strange in the pit of his stomach. He was definitely married to a heartthrob, he mused. She had said he wasn't scared of anything, but she was wrong. He feared one thing: losing her. Damn it, his heart was fooling around again. Karin persistently nudged the food in her plate, unable to take a single bite of the scrambled eggs and fried bacon in her plate. Her stomach was tied in a knot that was not going to dissipate any soon. Her hands were damp and she could feel sweat drops purling her forehead. She felt like she was on the edge of a heart attack. There was no purpose pretending she was nervous. Everything from the deep frown mark between her eyes to the tension oozing from her body screamed, I'm nervous. Naruto, who sat across her on the kitchen table, couldn't help an irritated remark. You need to eat something before we go out, he pointed out with the tone of an adult lecturing a recalcitrant child. I'm not very hungry, she muttered with a pout on her luscious lips, acting the role perfectly. Playing with your food won't give you more appetite, except you want us to be late. Perhaps, she replied in the same grumbling tone. Naruto just rolled his eyes and let out an exasperated sigh. We've already talked this through, Karin, last week. You need to consult a doctor, that's why we took an appointment with Ba-chan for this morning. You were okay with that, weren't you? Yes, but, he stopped her with a movement of his hand. If you intend telling me you've changed your mind, then don't say a word, he said in an authoritative tone he often used these days. We have a long-made appointment in 45 minutes and there is no way we're going to cancel it at the last minute because you freaked out even when you had all the time to cancel it before. Even if I have to carry you to the hospital by force, we'll be there when our turn comes. Is it a threat? She hissed. It's a promise. For a moment they glared at each other angrily, none of them wanting to reconsider their positions. But eventually Naruto's determination outpassed that of Karin. She dropped her eyes with an irritated but resigned sigh. He was right, she thought she had agreed to consult the 5th Hokage last week, and even if he had somehow forced her into this, he had nevertheless left her choice. They were in the midst of having dinner when Naruto had out of sudden stopped eating to look her straight in the eyes. "I've made an appointment with Tsunade Ba-chan," he'd said in calm controlled voice. "When? Why?" Karin squealed. "Calm down," Naruto soothed. "I just told her, I'll like it if she checked on you someday. Just to make sure the two of you are okay," he added as he saw the betrayed look in her eyes. The way he said the two of you with as if he really did care made Karin's heart melt with tenderness. He was so cute she thought, but at the same time she couldn't help but feel a little betrayed. She had made him understand she was not yet ready for that step, but at the same time when she had decided to keep the baby she should have known taking care of it was part of the process. "Thank you, but as I said earlier, we are okay," she grunted stubbornly. "And I said you can never be sure," he replied in the same tone. "I can because I'm its mother. So I know better," she said before realizing for the first time since she knew she was pregnant she really acknowledged this fact till the point of saying it loud. This realization sent her into a little state of shock. "More the reason why you should assure it's healthy and developing well," Naruto pointed out in a soft voice. "I don't doubt your maternal instincts, Karin, but I just want to be sure everything is okay. That both of you are fine." "Why?" she asked huskily. "Why do you care so much? It's not yours. Perhaps, but you are my wife and it has a part of you, so I'm bound to be worried about your well-being. Even if our marriage is more of a marriage of convenience than anything, it doesn't exclude the fact I consider you as my family and that I want to take care of you. Nevertheless, if you're still uncomfortable with that, I'll cancel the appointment," he said in a dry tone. Naruto had not brought this topic back from their walk in the woods till now, Karin either. But as the days passed her anxiety grew an inch. She was about to explode, that is if he did not beat her at the punch. At the moment his face had turned to a deep shade of red and he was pushing his plate aside. His eyebrows twitched in a way that augured nothing good. "Naruto?" she asked worriedly. "Are you okay?" "No Karin, I'm not," he blurted out. "For the past months I've been very patient, paying attention not to push because I know how hard all this is for you. I've tried hard, real hard, not to, but I'm starting to lose patience. Every time I think we've made a step ahead you always do like 2 steps back. So I think it's about time you told me what scares you so much. What is it that makes you act this way? Please tell me what the actual problem is so we could work it out together. I'm short of ideas, I don't seem to understand you anymore, so what is the fucking problem?" His words struck in the silent room like thunder. Karin stared wide-eyed at the man in front of her. Naruto was a master of himself almost all the time. Though sometimes he could be very authoritative, he barely lost patience. At least not like this. She must have pushed him too hard this time. Before she could apologize he was faster than her again. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have shouted," he said with an apologetic voice. "I'm just feeling so frustrated." He passed his hands over his face as if it could wash away or ease his tension. "I don't know what to do else to put you at ease. You're right, I'm scared," she cut him. "If I've been avoiding facing this reality all this while is because I'm scared." "Of what?" "Of finding out that I also messed this," she admitted in a trembling voice. "I've always wanted to have children, but I was afraid that being a wreck they will turn out to be like me. So I thought if I found the right guy to father them, they'll have chances to grow out to be better than what I am. But those men came my way and none of them could be good enough to better this situation given what they have done. So I'm scared to find out the baby will be screwed up as a natural and righteous punishment for the evil I've done. And the only one to be blamed is me. Not a day passes without me thinking of this. That's why I try hard to ignore it even if I know it's not right, but I just can't help it." Her voice broke as tears began to blur her vision and sorrow made any sound coming out of her throat impossible. As usual in those moments Naruto was there beside her, his comforting arms surrounding her shaking body. "I can't deny those bastards are not the ideal father someone will imagine for their child, but you are its mother. Sure, you made errors, but you've been punished for them already and you still continue punishing yourself. This shows you're not an evil person because you feel regrets for what you've done. For that fact, this baby stands all the chances of being a wonderful person in life because you've done sufficient mistakes to show him the right path to choose and you'll never let him fall into evil." "Are you sure?" she asked in an uncertain voice. "Very sure," he acquiesced, nodding his head frantically. "I trust you," he added with a confident smile that almost made her believe he could be right. "The only fear I have is that this baby turns out to be a drama queen like its mom. In that case I don't think we'll ever have enough handkerchiefs at home," he joked. Karin couldn't help a smile from stretching her lips. Even when she was sad and blue, he knew how to make her laugh, she thought. Only he could do this. Naruto was really special. You can confirm the appointment. I will. What do you think about next week? She had nodded in agreement. Now a week later she felt that familiar unease resurging. She knew she better not start another scene, but at the same time she was under pressure. Can I go to the ladies? She asked out of the blue with a cute little voice. Of course, Naruto replied, intrigued both by her sudden change of behavior and by the childish demand. Since when did she need his approval to go to the toilets? This woman was definitely going to drive him crazy, he thought to himself, shaking his head dismissively. 15 minutes later she was back. Whatever she had been doing in the toilet must have worked, because though she still looked nervous, she was obviously prepared to leave. Good, he had already cleared the table from the remains of their almost untouched breakfast. I guess we could leave now, he inquired, more affirming than interrogating. Yes, she said in a little voice. No urgent need to visit the ladies anymore or burst into tears, are you sure? Because you might as well do all that now before we reach the hospital, he said, half in jest and half in earnest. Yes, she answered, feeling a little irritated, and started heading for the door. Alright, I was just asking, we're never too sure with drama queens, he murmured slowly for her not to understand. He wasn't prepared for a crisis of hysteria. Karin was already in front of the building when he caught up with her. Hey, slowly, he cried. I thought you said we should hurry, she snapped, not slowing down her pace the least bit. However, 15 minutes later they were sitting in the waiting room adjacent to Tsunade's office in the hospital. Karin was tense like a spring in Naruto's attempt to calm her down were vain. At this moment, no reassuring words, no matter how soft and confidently they were said, could work out her anxiety. Only Tsunade's clinical and concrete diagnostic could dissipate it. So when the latter emerged from her office, Naruto was a bit relieved. I thought you guys were never going to make it. You're 15 minutes late, she said in an accusing tone. You are not the only people I have to attend to. People my ass. 3 bottles of sake, yes. Naruto snarled mentally. However, he didn't voice his opinion loud, one because the atmosphere was already tense, and secondly he feared the reaction of the older woman, whose hot temper as well as her heavy bosom were well known. Besides, he'd had enough drama for today, so he opted for diplomacy. But we're here finally, he said in a light tone. She just flashed him a chilling glare before turning her attention to Karin. Nice to see you again, Karin. I'm happy you decided to consult a doctor finally, she said in a voice which could be considered soft coming from her surly self. Karin barely nodded before she spoke again, switching to a more professional tone. How are you feeling? Fine, Karin stuttered. She was never very comfortable in the presence of this very intimidating woman. Even if she knew she barked more than she bit, she couldn't help it. Anyway, we're going to be fixed pretty soon. Come with me, she said, turning her heels in direction of the office she just popped out from. Karin stood up and followed her. She was almost at the door when she realized Naruto had not moved an inch and froze. You're not coming in? She asked, a little puzzled. No, actually I feel it will be better if you went there by yourself, you need some privacy. I wouldn't want my presence to embarrass you, especially when you're already so anxious, he explained gawkily. Karin just nodded in understanding. She had hoped he would come along with her, so she felt a little bit disappointed, but at the same time she had to recognize somehow he was right. They had lived together for 2 months and he had always seen her fully clothed apart from the day he'd rescued her and the incident with Bra. No wonder he didn't feel like sharing this kind of intimacy. On her part, even if she trusted him very much, she was not sure to feel comfortable around him fat and half naked. It was just good he decided to stay out. Okay. I'll see you later then, she said simply. I'll be waiting for you. I'm not going anywhere, he assured her before she entered the room and closed the door on her slender frame. Karin was lying on the cold table looking at the ceiling while Tsunade examined her. Her hands were soft and precise, but Karin was incapable of feeling totally relaxed. She felt relieved when Tsunade put down the sheet that lay on her laps to move to her bloated tummy. While she touched and examined her abdomen, she asked her questions. Do you feel any pain while I'm touching you? No. Alright, she placed a stethoscope on her stomach. What about these past months? Any dizziness or nausea? Feel free to tell or ask me anything. I sometimes feel dizzy, but it doesn't happen often. But I constantly feel nauseous, especially in the mornings and the evenings. Hearing this, The blonde doctor furrowed her eyebrows. The nausea often goes by the 3rd months. Sometimes it extends to the 4th month or the whole pregnancy. But don't worry, I'll give you something for that. I guess you have no appetite as well, she affirmed more than she asked. Karin just nodded. I thought so too, you're slightly underweight. Slightly was clearly an understatement as the girl was skinny despite her round tummy, but her role was not to scare but reassure her. But we could remedy that too. Have you started feeling it moving? Karin shook her head in response. It's okay. You'll be feeling it anytime soon. All the same, despite your low iron levels and your deficiency in vitamins, your baby seems to be developing very well. What would you say if we saw it in pictures? It would be nice. Tsunade drew an ultrasound machine closer to the table and took a bottle that she aimed at Karin's abdomen. It's a little cold, she warned before pouring the gel on her lower abdomen where it was swollen. Karin barely had time to register her words when she felt the icy sensation and flinched a little bit. Sorry, Tsunade apologized as if she could have done something about it. It's okay, Karin murmured. Here we go, she exclaimed, aligning the ultrasound wand on the gel-coated skin and describing circular arcs. First there was silence as grayish images appeared on the screen. Floating in a liquid-surrounded cavity lay her daughter or son, Karin thought as she saw the indistinct figure that showed on the screen. Say hello to your baby, Karin, Tsunade said in a soft voice as she proceeded to distinguish parts of its tiny body. Here's his head. Those as its limbs. 2 hands and 2 legs. She proceeded, knowing the young mother to be needed to be reassured. Now you can listen to his heart beating, she continued. Karin barely shook her head, too overwhelmed to utter a word as tears filled her eyes and a lump formed at the back of her throat. Never in her wildest dreams could she have pictured this moment. She didn't feel anxious or scared anymore, she was relieved and amazed. For the past months in the warm shelter of her tummy, this perfect tiny human being had been growing. Fragile and yet so strong because it had made it despite the adverse conditions she had submitted it to, via her negligence and irrational fears. This thought made her heart to clench, she could have heard it. At that moment, she promised herself from now on she was solely going to endeavor for its well-being. Gosh, she had made this. Despite what she had been thinking, this baby was just perfect, a pure miracle. At this point tears were inevitably flowing on her cheeks. Will you like to know the? Tsunade inquired in a warm voice. Yes, she replied in a raspy voice, knowing already it didn't matter if she had a boy or a girl. I'm sorry, that will have to wait. After all, this little timid doesn't want us to know just yet. It doesn't matter, Karin answered, too happy to care about such an insignificant detail. In that case everything is fine. Both of you are healthy, but I wouldn't want you to try your luck by continuing the way you've been for the past months. She handed a handkerchief over to her to wipe the sticky gel from her stomach. Meet me in the office when you finish dressing. Later on, while they were seating in Tsunade's office, the latter gave Karin advice along with a pile of prenatal vitamins and other medication. Karin listened as carefully as her exhilaration could enable her. When the older woman considered she had given her enough advice, she escorted her to the door, wishing her all the best. Naruto had been waiting for almost half an hour when Tsunade and Karin emerged from the office. He immediately set his feet to meet them. The strange expression on Karin's face alarmed him. Is everything okay? He questioned, moving his eyes from his wife to the legendary Nen. Don't worry, Naruto. Both of them are perfectly alright. I've given Karin some vitamins and other drugs as well as a list of things she should include in her diet. Is there anything else I need to know? I'm a little clueless when it comes to pregnancy and babies, he said in a humble voice that made the 2 women smile at how cute he was. It's not complicated. Good rest and diet accompanied by prenatal medication is usually sufficient. She also has to avoid overexerting herself and stay away from any emotional stress. Though a little exercise from time to time won't hurt. Talking about it, is it normal she cries all the time? He asked in a half-accusing, half-worrying tone that made Karin blush. Tsunade just smiled before answering. It's normal. It's all because of hormones, the 5th Hokage explained. Naruto made an "ah" sound which fooled nobody on his lack of understanding. So Tsunade took another 5 minutes to explain to him the thrills of hormones and mood swings, depicting the whole thing as realistically as she could, without trying to frighten him. In the end she was surprised how fast he understood majority of it. These last recommendations made Tsunade sent them off. Thank you very much, Ba-chan, Naruto said as he waved her goodbye. As if I had any choice. She grunted just for measure. While in her heart she couldn't suppress a pang of joy to notice finally this marriage was not going so bad for the two of them. She fervently hoped they found the happiness they had always longed for in each other perhaps. On the way back home, Naruto cast sideward glances at his wife that was silently walking beside him, the strange expression still plastered on her face. Suddenly she stopped in the middle of the way. "Is there something wrong?" Naruto exclaimed, all of his senses in alert. "No," Karin turned around, flashing him perfectly white wide smile he'd barely seen her put on. "I just wanted to tell you from now on we'll just be heading ahead and there will be no more drama queen crisis, happy?" Naruto just nodded, puzzled and a little scared. Who was this woman and what had Tsunade given her to make her so blissful? Before he could voice his thoughts, Karin had already resumed walking and Naruto could not be more puzzled than when he heard her humming softly while rubbing her stomach. Perhaps this was the new Karin he'd been waiting for all this while. It could only be, because something had definitely changed. He just hoped it would last long. He already loved the sweet humming, he thought as he fastened his pace to meet her. When he was at her level, she rested her head on his shoulder as she draped a hand on his neck. Kami-sama. He was definitely going to like this new Karin. Karin had said no more drama queen and she had meant it. From the day they had gone to the hospital till now she had been lingering in a state of sheer serenity. At the beginning Naruto had a little been on the edge whenever he saw her peaceful smile and the little light that shone in her eyes. But over the last month he had come to the conclusion that the smile was there to stay. She was really starting to experience bliss. As absurd as it may sound, that was it, and Naruto felt her happiness staining on him too. How could it not be when every morning he woke up to the sound of chirping birds and her melodious voice? Karin sang all day long, while she cooked, when she cleaned, even in the course of mending his torn shirts and washing his muddy training gears. It was so elating, not only because she had a beautiful voice but also because the smile that continuously spread her sensual lips was a sight to make an angel doubt. There was not only the singing and smiling. Karin's face seemed healthier, in fact her whole body glowed. She followed Tsunade's advice strictly. She took her vitamins as prescribed and played less with her food. She no longer exhausted herself at sterilizing the house from the least grain of dust as she used to. She now had an activity schedule, as he came to realize through observation. Talking about observation, he liked watching her rub her round small tummy or draw circles on it soothingly. He loved the way she exuded so much maternal love and tenderness. Occasionally she went for a walk in the park, and much to Naruto's surprise she had even gone shopping 2 times. True, the grocery in question was not in the middle of the town, but it was quite close to habitation. This just showed she was ready-face people. In fact, Karin seemed to be really living now. This time she had really stuck to her word and Naruto felt very proud of her. Till now he still didn't know what had happened in that examination room, but one thing was sure: he would never thank Tsunade enough for Karin's developed interest in the baby growing inside of her. It made her look good. Actually, she seemed to feel good. At this moment, though, she didn't seem to be that good, he thought as he saw the deep frown on her face. Shit, she grunted as she held 2 tiny buttons that a second later had been on her blouse. Any problem? Karin looked up and blushed. Nothing I can't solve, she muttered. With that she hastily got up from the couch and escaped to her room. She came some minutes later wearing another of her high-collar tunics that covered her neck, arms and cleavage. This time around it had no buttons, but the way it stretched over her expanded tummy, it might as well tear apart, Naruto thought. She looked confined and very uncomfortable. Karin needed new clothes, and it was obvious. Though she had not gained much weight, her stomach was visibly expanding and her breasts were getting fuller. She needed clothes adapted to these changes. As much as he liked the clothes she wore, none of them were fit for this. They were either too loose or not loose enough. No wonder buttons popped. He'd been waiting for her to ask him for new ones, but he knew Karin wouldn't. She was too proud. It was normal, she'd been taking care of herself alone all this while, and he understood it was difficult for her to accept somebody's help, especially when it came to such basic issues. Nevertheless, given that she had quit her job in the library, or more precisely the council had arranged for her to be sacked. She had no source of revenue, and no matter the amount of savings she had, he was very sure it wouldn't be enough to refill her wardrobe with maternity clothing. He on the other hand had enough money, so there was no way. His wife continued strangling in her clothes while he could help it. "You need new clothes," he stated. "What makes you think so?" Karin snorted. "That," he retorted, casting an eloquent glance to her tummy and the buttons she had left on the table. If you say so, she scowled stubbornly to mask her embarrassment. With her belly taking larger proportions, her gowns and tunics became tighter. It was a miracle she still fitted in her favorite skinny jeans even if she could barely button it. But what could she do? As long as he wanted to buy new ones, she couldn't afford them. Also, she was too shy to ask Naruto, but obviously he had no such problem. I'm not going to argue on something we both know is obvious. Before you argue, he said, raising one of his hands, I'd like to tell you it was not a suggestion, it was rather information. So you better save your energy because we're going shopping now. Now? She gasped. Of course, when did you expect us to do it? I'm sure you realized I've got plenty of things to do these times. In fact, you were the one who insisted I took more missions, he pointed out. It was true. Tired of seeing him roaming in the house and climbing to the walls because of boredom, Karin had urged Naruto to accept more missions. She felt uncomfortable knowing he stayed at home mostly to take care of her. It was not because she was not fond of going out that he had to confine himself in the house with her. But Naruto, not very convinced, had refused, so to prove to him she could take care of herself, one day she had ventured herself to town. Not actually, but far enough to the nearest grocery to their building. The bravery it had taken her to face the curious stares as well as their hateful glares when they recognized her, had been sufficient for her to repeat the experiences 3 other times. Most importantly, it had convinced him, and he had started taking more missions and had others planned anytime soon. He was rarely at home these days, though she missed his continuous presence from time to time. She had to agree it made her some good to be all by herself at times. She felt less like a burden. I know, but you just can't just take decisions so suddenly and expect me to execute your orders just like that. Why? He asked unrepentantly. Because it's not fair and, quote ellipsis, it's not easy for you to get up just like that? He teased, making her to blush even more. You're impossible and stubborn. She yelled. So says the frying pan to the teapot, he smirked as she pouted angrily. Nevertheless, woman, we're going shopping whether you like it or not, because if you refuse to go I'm just going to get those damn clothes, and if I take the wrong size you'll have yourself to blame. So you chose. The stubborn redhead maintained her stance with an outraged dignity silence for a moment before resigning. Fine, she grumbled, just for the sake of it. But it's only because I wouldn't want you to waste your money in vain, she added hastily when she saw his triumphal expression. If you say so, he laughed before she gave him a whack that almost choked him. Few minutes later they were heading for town. After walking 15 minutes, they could see the numerous tall buildings clustered in colorful bunches, the boisterous noises and heavy odors that could only belong to the main part of Konoha. Naruto drew her to him and wrapped a hand around her expanding waist protectively. This gesture was so unexpected that it made Karin blush. Something only he was able to do. You don't need to hold me, you know. I'm not going to run away, she scoffed to hide her uneasiness. I know, but with you one can never be too sure, he replied, flashing her one of his toothy grin. Only he knew the secret. She just huffed, pretending to be furious while inside her heart somersaulted with joy. She liked been so close to Naruto, but they rarely got to be like this. The only moments he cuddled her were those moments when she felt so down and desperate she needed comfort. If not, he kept a remarkable distance between them most of the time. Even if he was caring and lovely, he wasn't very demonstrative. What was he to demonstrate as a matter of fact? Love? It had never been taken in consideration from the start, and it was sadly never going to be. Shrugging the idea from her head, she tried to relax and enjoy the moment. Naruto led her through the streets, oblivious to the murmuring and curious stares on their way. Certainly he gained this confidence after many years of practice, she thought, many awful years. If she tried to, one day she will be able to strut in town with so much confidence. Why not practice now? She squared her elbows and held her head up. Not so difficult when you had someone like Naruto by your side. Suddenly they stopped in front of a boutique at the end of a row of 10 others. Here we are, he informed her. Karin raised an eyebrow, which clearly said, how do you know this place? Once Sakura dragged me here to buy a gift for Kurenai-sensei's baby shower, he explained reluctantly. We are not here to tell stories or admire the facade, so let's get in. Karin didn't insist. With time she had come to know he avoided as much as possible to talk about Sasuke or Sakura. Karin had concluded the subject was a sensitive one. She suspected he still had feelings for the pink-head kunoichi. It made her feel sad even if she understood it was difficult for one to just get over their first love. As they entered the boutique, the bell rang. Everything in the shop reminded of maternity, Karin mused. From the pale colors and rounded tummy plastic models to the lavender perfume that floated in the air. The atmosphere was all soft and serene, the dresses exquisite. Naruto couldn't have chosen a better place, she thought. But when she saw the tall, pretty, thin model that strutted to them, a Cheshire cat grin spreading her lips as she made eye contact with Naruto, her excitement fell a little bit. "What can I do for you?" Her voice trailed as she finally recognized the two of them. It was true, having the Kyuubi's vessel and one of Orochimaru's former minions in the same place and obviously together was a little bit disconcerting. Karin conceded, giving her credit. Even if Naruto had saved the village from pain and that on a global point of view the villagers, if not loved, respected him, some minds were still bitter. This woman was surely one of them. In his usual unperturbed tone, Naruto pretended he had not seen the decomposed expression on her face. "Good afternoon," he started in a very polite tone. "My wife and I need clothes that could fit." "We don't sell slut outfits," she said in disgust. "The toy shop is not around here." For a moment Karin was dumbstruck by such obvious gut-clenching repugnance. She had faced hostility a few number of times during her excursions in town from the day she had set her feet in this village, but this attack was direct and very offending. Naruto tensed a little and his grasp around her waist tightened, but he didn't depart from his cool. "I don't think that's what I asked for. Nevertheless, thank you for the information. What I need are maternity clothes and your boutique seemed to be specialized in those, so are you going to help me?" "I don't think." "Megumi?" A female voice from the back of the shop called before a woman dressed in a very fashionable white suit and high heels emerged. For a moment her eyes moved from the fierce expression on said Megumi's face to Naruto's cold mask and Karin's petrified expression. It was not difficult to imagine what had happened. "You can leave us, I'm going to take care of this," she said flatly to the waitress, who hurried away. She turned back her head to Naruto, a very commercial smile gracing her lips. "Welcome, Uzumaki-san. It's been long since the last time we saw you here. I beg you to excuse my employee's rudeness. She is new and she doesn't the policy of the house." Which was not very difficult to guess, Karin thought. The woman was obviously not a great fan of her. The cold glare she shot her was more eloquent than words. However, she was conscious of the fact that she was with Naruto and he could afford to pay, so she put her disapproval aside and business first. "So how can I help you?" she asked far too sweetly. "Here's my wife Karin," he informed, drawing her closer to him if possible while sustaining the lady's bewildered look as her eyes settled on both of their bare ring fingers. "As you can see, she's expecting and therefore she needs appropriate clothing to suit her condition. Can you be of any help?" The woman's surprised expression morphed into a more professional. She assessed Karin's frame with a rapid, sharp, scrutinizing look before answering. "No problem, that will be child's play. If you'll follow me, please." With that she turned on her heels and led them to the back of the shop, which was obviously unoccupied. She indicated them a comfortable-looking booth while she went around collecting dresses she thought could fit Karin. "Are you okay?" he asked. "Don't mind the idiot," he said, mimicking the first woman. Karin just smiled while the shopkeeper came back with a heaped clothes she shoved into Karin's hands while she escorted her to a dressing cabin. She waited outside while Karin changed. Karin felt a little wind-washed. She had never seen so many clothes gathered together at the same time and on the same place. Except the first day she had done Naruto's laundry? Though to think of it, this did not hold the comparison. The gowns and tunics were neat, lovely and clean, unlike the heap of crumpled shirts she had washed for almost a week. However, as lovely and nice as the dresses were, they were far too exposing. None of them could hide enough her neck, hands and cleavage, all ravaged by the multiple bite marks she had earned in the course of using her healing capacities to treat injured people. The clothes she wore often concealed those parts, even if they were usually stuffy and hot, but at least she could walk around without people staring at the marks and making sleazy comments. She could make use of makeup to disguise them, but it was not a very practical solution. "Is there any problem?" the shopkeeper asked as she popped her head through the door. Karin turned around a little startled, making a mistake because she gave the woman a view of what she strained so much to conceal to the rest of the world. For a moment the woman stared at her marked body, gap-mouthed, then an almost sympathetic expression crossed her face. "Not easy being the Kyuubi's wife, right? Don't worry, I have what you need. She addressed a mischievous wink to her before disappearing. Karin blushed, deeply embarrassed. The woman thought she had earned those marks in the course of lovemaking with Naruto? The idea was not so offending, but the thought of the ideas that were going to pop in her mind concerning their supposed UAL life was quite disturbing. What if during a hot gossip session with her staff or other clients, she divulged her discovery? Karin won't be able to hold her head high again, that was certain. Just as she was thinking about it, the woman emerged in the cabin again with yet another heap of clothes. "Try this," she urged. Seeing the worry in Karin's eyes, she reassured her. "Don't worry, one of the policy of the house is to maintain our clients' privacy secret." "I hope so," Karin blurted inwardly. She proceeded in trying the assortment of high-collared gowns and long-sleeved tunics the woman had brought. There were also maternity jeans and shorts. All of these were made in fine material and had pretty colors that fitted her pale skin and red hair. Being the professional she was, the woman also included lingerie. And what lingerie? Why, teasing, lace and lycra, which would have even made a whale look like a pinup. She also gave her a lot of accessory-like scarves, arguing that they could help conceal those hickeys, as she called them, when she felt so hot she couldn't wear a pullover. When they had finished selecting amongst the clothes which ones fit Karin best and the ones she loved most, they returned to Naruto, who had been patiently waiting on the booth sipping a glass of cool Coke. When he saw her coming out, he almost choked, and an expression of pure admiration marked his face. Karin couldn't have felt better. Reika, as she had discovered the woman was called, had convinced her to wear some of her new clothes. They had opted for a turtleneck bottle green gown with long puffy sleeves. It clung to her incredible bosom before falling into cotton folds that disguised the curve of her tummy till her knees, exposing her shapely legs. She'd put a black vest on top and a scarf of the same color hung on her neck. The outfit was simple and sassy, and it suited her well. He extended a hand to her and he drew her close when she took it. They followed Reika to the cash register where Naruto paid the bill. Karin felt a little guilty when she saw the huge amount written on it. But Naruto repressed her protestations. They walked out after promising the shopkeeper they will return if they needed anything else, and Karin couldn't help but think the lady definitely had the sense of business. "Did you enjoy the day?" he inquired. "Yes, very much. Thanks to you. I just hope I didn't ruin you." Naruto raised an ironical eyebrow as he watched her worried expression. "Even if it were the case, I wouldn't tell you because I don't discuss money matters with women," he scoffed, earning him a punch in the ribs. "Ouch. Relax. I was just kidding. You are so touchy at times." His tone changed into a more serious one. "Karin, you have to know it's not because I live in a shabby apartment and I look shabby that it means I don't have enough money to take care of you or the baby. Over the years I've accumulated enough money to live a comfortable life. I'm not saying I'm super rich, but I have more than enough money to provide you with basic needs without being ruined. Never get worked up because of that. I'll have to, if your definition of basic need is expensive clothing," she scowled. "It suits you well," he said, as if it justified everything. "Besides, you deserve the best," he added in a softer tone. "Thanks. It's very kind of you," she said, rising on her toes to place a light kiss on his cheeks. "Besides, our apartment is not shabby, neither are you. If I had known you will be this sweet, I'll taken you shopping earlier," he teased to mask his blushing. "Naruto. Just kidding." Karin just shook her head. "How come you get to show perfect manners a second and become so childish a second later? Hey, I didn't grow up in a jungle, my building is just near the woods." He protested, faking outraged dignity. "Besides, Iruka-sensei is very strict on good manners. Actually, I'm a very polite guy, you know." "No kidding," he insisted as he saw the laconic look she gave him. "Though I'll have loved to squeeze that Megumi's neck, what a bitch." "What happened to the manners?" Karin asked sarcastically. "I only use them when I'm in front of ladies." Naruto. "Ouch. I was just kidding. Like hell you were." This happy babbling continued till they reached home. That night when they each went to bed, a sigh of pleasure and satisfaction left their lips at the thought of this day, which had been a bad omen but which had turned to be fine at the end, and in their respective rooms, unaware of the other, said the same. They drawled. "This only happens with Karin. This only happens with Naruto." Karin sighed as she scrambled on the couch to get on her feet. This was getting a little difficult as she was getting to her 6th month. Her stomach was inflating almost every week, adding more pressure on her back, thus the little back ache that barely left her. It was manageable though. She could still move around the house without assistance and carry her various activities normally. The only difference was that now she had to take a little nap in the course of the day in order to rest her body. There was also the morning sickness which manifested itself from time to time. Karin had been appalled to discover she was one of the few women who experienced morning sickness throughout their whole pregnancies. The medication Tsunade had given her along with a lot of water intake reduced the number of crises, but from time to time she still had to rush to the toilet or nearest sink to puke her guts out. Only God knew how much she hated those moments. Nevertheless, they were part of the pack, which included other marvelous instants like feeling the small fluttering movements of the baby in her womb or the occasional kicks. During these moments Karin felt an indescribable elation. The first time Karin had felt it had been a few days after her shopping trip with Naruto. She was washing dishes when she had felt the small, nearly unnoticeable movement. At first she had thought it was her imagination, but the movement had repeated itself and Karin had felt her heart bounce in joy. Tears had started welling in her eyes as a wide grin had spread her lips. She'd hesitated placing a hand on her tummy, fearing this might frighten the little being, but when she had yielded to the will to feel the movement against her hand, the child had found no problem in repeating the performance. Eventually it had stopped as abruptly as it had started, but from that day the fluttering and kicking had become recurrent. It was even stronger when Naruto was around. Karin had noticed. The baby seemed to appreciate his company as much as its mother did. Unfortunately, Karin felt shy about sharing this intimacy with the blonde shinobi. As awkward and absurd as it might sound, she felt letting him touch her tummy would trigger a fire from the sparks that seemed to come out whenever they were together. They both pretended they didn't exist, but the truth was with each passing day the fire grew stronger, threatening to consume both of them. Despite that, none of them seemed ready to yield to the other. A very comprehensive reaction given the emotional trauma they had both experienced in their lives. Karin just hoped one day they will feel enough confidence to open up their hearts to feel again. While waiting for that day, she had to start making preparations for tomorrow's dinner. Naruto will be back from his one-week mission. Last week the Hokage had requested him to the office to take an S-rank mission that involved capturing a rogue ninja who had been spreading terror in the Fire Country, along with 2 other ninjas. At first Karin had not been very comfortable with the idea of Naruto risking his life, but she had come back to reason. Naruto was a ninja. For that reason he had duties to fulfill that didn't include staying at home and taking care of her, but protecting the village from enemy attacks as well as lending a hand to ally villages when it was necessary. He'd been avoiding these duties for too long. It was about time he concentrated back on them. That was exactly why she had not made a fuss when he informed her he'd be absent for a week. Karin knew she'd miss him like crazy, but instead she had nodded in understanding and flashed him a reassuring smile. He'd flashed back. The past days she had been agonizing of worry and longing, but he was back soon and she reserved him a perfect welcome back dinner. She screened through the fridge to make a list of what she already had and what was left to buy. When it was done, she went to the kitchen drawer where Naruto had left more than enough money to take care of herself during his absence. She withdrew some banknotes that she slid in her purse before leaving the apartment. The day was perfect for a walk, neither too hot nor too cold. As the days passed, going to town made her think of a more philosophical exercise than a death sentence. She ignored hateful glares as much as she could make it and attributed people's hostility a derisive reason. For example, if the greengrocer frowned through the whole time she passed her command, it was surely because he had an indigestion. The expression on his face resembled that of someone who had had an overdose of bananas. The fishmonger surely made faces because of the strong scent of his cods. Poor woman, having to support this stench all day. As for the bitter curve on the butcher's face while he cut meat, it was certainly because had a quarrel with his wife, given the scary way he sharpened his knives. Looking at her, she surely resembled her. She could only feel for him. Marriage was not easy thing. She knew what she was talking about. With a little of humor and irony she could face everything. Most of the things on her list were crossed except for milk and eggs, but she could pick them on her way back. She was interrupted in her trail of thoughts by the shock of 2 bodies, hers and another person's. Gosh, say she had almost gone back home with no incidents. Stay cool, Karin, she thought. Be sweet and polite. I'm sorry, she apologized, looking into lavender eyes. It's my fault, I wasn't paying attention. Me too, a kind lovely voice answered. Are you all right? She asked with concern which took Karin a little aback. She was not used to such consideration from other people apart from Naruto and Tsunade-sama. Yes, thank you. What about you? I'm perfect. Karin looked at the young woman standing in front of her. She seemed to have her age, though the innocent expression of her eyes made her look like a child. A pregnant child then, because the huge tummy that protruded beneath her silk lavender maternity gown was too defined to be considered a fatty belly. Besides, she wasn't exactly fat, she just had chubby cheeks, surely as a result of her condition. Just like her swollen ankles wrapped in pretty sandals. What a pretty face, by the way, huge lavender eyes, a lovely nose and pink plump lips that could come from a man's wet dreams. What a sense of observation, Karin, she snapped inwardly. The woman too seemed to be scrutinizing her frame, going from her flat black ballerina shoes up to her black leggings and lilac cotton high-collar maternity tunic. Karin praised herself before going out. She had taken time to adjust her appearance. First, because nice clothes were a good armor to face a hateful crowd with dignity, and secondly because anybody will have felt self-conscious and out of place in front of submitted to this sharp gaze, even if it held no contempt or meanness. When the brunette caught Karin's crimson gaze, she blushed and hurriedly looked away. Sorry, she apologized. I'm being rude. Don't be. I did the same, Karin said flatly. Must be a ninja thing. A very natural one, by the way. Yes. The woman smiled shyly. My name is Hinata Inuzuka. She bowed instead of extending a hand. Noble education, Karin thought before presenting herself. I'm Karin, Uzumaki Naruto's wife, Hinata completed. I'm one of Naruto's friends. I've heard about your wedding. It's a pity I couldn't attend it. It was quickly decided, in fact, Karin explained as if there was a need to. It doesn't matter. You look busy, perhaps I'm bothering you. Not at all, Karin protested. I was almost through. In that case, you wouldn't mind joining me for a cup of tea somewhere? It would be my pleasure, Karin replied, surprised by her own answer. She couldn't help it. Being polite and friendly with Hinata was easy. They walked to a tea shop not very far, and settled on comfortable booths while their bags lay at their feet. Karin took chamomile tea while Hinata opted for green tea. How far are you? Hinata asked to begin the conversation. 24 weeks, Karin replied. What about you? 30 weeks. Do you know if it's a boy or a girl? Not yet. What about you? 2 girls. I'm expecting twins, Hinata explained, rubbing her stomach lovingly. Your husband must be very thrilled, Karin said, glancing at the silver band on a Hinata's ring finger with a little bit of envy. She and Naruto had no wedding rings. Considering the nature of their marriage, it was no surprise. But Karin couldn't help but feel a little blue or envious whenever she saw one on someone else's finger. Yes, Kiba was very excited. He's a very hands-on husband, and I suspect he'll be very hands-on father too. But I'm sure you understand what I mean. It seems to me Naruto is exactly the same. Somehow, Karin agreed, taking a sip of her tea. He's very attentive and caring. He does all he can to make me happy. I recognize Naruto there. He's kind and undemanding. I'm glad he found a special person like you to be his wife. I don't think I'm quite special, Karin chuckled, a tad embarrassed. I do, Hinata replied, adamant. These past years Naruto has been a shadow of him. You know, after the Sakura and Sasuke thing. That's why I was surprised to find out he was getting married. But when I look at you, I now understand why. You are truthful and kind. It's too early to draw this conclusion. Don't you think so? Karin asked, suddenly feeling self-conscious. I don't need years to make myself an opinion of people. I'm certain of what I'm saying. Believe me, if you were as bad as people say, Naruto won't have married you in the first place. So she knew who she was, Karin reflected. How could she not? It was obvious everybody in town knew about her. But she surely didn't know the circumstances under which she had married Naruto, or she preferred to ignore them. Just as well she didn't feel as talking about them. You seem to be very close to Naruto, Karin questioned in an attempt to switch the subject. Not that close. But when we were younger I had a crush on him, she confessed. But I got over it eventually, when I found true love with Kiba. I hope it doesn't embarrass you? Not at all. Just that Naruto never mentioned it. Given that we never dated, it's normal he didn't want to upset you with such details. That must be the reason. All the same, I'm happy your relationship was platonic. Competing with someone like you would have been tough, beautiful, sassy, intelligent. It's kind of difficult to find better bride, she said in a joking tone, though deep inside she meant it. Hinata laughed heartily. You're very funny, but thank you. I must confess it's the first time I meet a woman who succeeds in making fun out of such a situation instead of being mean. It's refreshing. Always happy to oblige, she said comically, making Hinata burst yet into another contagious laughter. Karin found herself laughing too. When they had both calmed down, Hinata spoke again. It's been a while since I got to speak so open-heartedly with someone of my age. My friends are very busy with their families or their missions. I stay at home most of the time and I get bored. Kiba is very entertaining when he's around, but it feels good to talk to someone of the same from time to time. Maybe that's why I talk so much. I don't mind. Actually, I'm much of a talker too. Besides, I understand how you feel. I can't remember ever having fun with any girl, especially not of my age. As far I can remember, I've always been the only girl in a band of boys. I'd never known female company could be fun till now. I'm having a great moment, thank you Hinata-chan, Karin said sincerely, and she was indeed. The only women Karin had ever come along were either rivals or prisoners. She'd been under the wings of Orochimaru very young before she ever got time to make true friends. As a matter of fact, she only had vague memories of her childhood before that period. Living in Orochimaru's lair and working for him didn't provide much time and space to make friends. The people in those hideouts didn't give a damn about friendship or relationships. It was a world where emotions had no place. Trust was hardly given for fear of hurt or betrayal. Survival of the fittest was the prime rule. What was the purpose of getting acquainted to someone when you knew the person could be taken away from you at any moment? How could you trust someone when you knew one day both of you will have to compete to survive? Mercy had no place. The merciless lived longer, the compassionate were quickly eradicated. Pity had no place, friendship even less, except in one's most secret aspirations. Hinata didn't need to be a medium to understand this. Though she had never experienced the type of life Karin had lived before, she knew the shinobi world was cruel. She'd had a bitter taste of it, could be dark and gruesome. When you dealt with people like the evil snake Sannin, it was not very far from hell. No wonder people got out from there either half dead or psychologically traumatized for life. The man was definitely sick. Thank God he was dead. Refusing her mind to wander to such unpleasant thoughts, she brought back her focus to Karin. I'm happy I introduced you to the joys of girly gossip. I'm not an expert like Ino or Sakura, but I'm not that bad. So I could give you plenty of tips if you want. Especially now both of us have plenty of free time, she said with an eloquent look to their swollen tummies. I'd very much like to, Karin replied, more touched than she could have imagined. Then we have a deal, Hinata exclaimed before falling into yet another fit of contagious laughter. They chatted for some time again before they decided it was time to part from one another, with promises to meet again for an occasional tea. Karin was so thrilled by the pleasant encounter she almost forgot to buy milk and eggs as she had planned to. When she got home, she was euphoric still on the effect of her newly made relationship. For the first time since she had stepped in Konoha, she felt a little integrated. But foremost, she had found answers to questions that had been whirling in her mind of recent. In the course of their discussion, Karin had confirmed if Hinata had a crush on Naruto during their young years, she had really gotten over him. Hinata didn't have to shout it on rooftops. It was evident that she was head over heels in love with her husband. Whatever they discussed, she always found it a little bit connected to her husband. A cute, dreamy smile spread her lips whenever she mentioned his name. Her devotion to Kiba was obvious. Yet she wasn't like a senseless groupie in front of her idol. Neither did she worship him like a pagan god. Instead, the love that seeped in her voice mingled with respect and discernment. They seemed to be inseparable. According to Hinata, they did almost everything together. He was, as she had said herself, the center of her world. Karin could have felt envious of the love Hinata seemed to profess to her husband. Instead, it made her think. For the past months now, Karin had started developing feelings for her convenient husband. Karin could not exactly say when he had moved from the status of savior and friend to that of the man she loved more than any man she'd ever met before. But what she was sure of was that she was in love with him. Whenever she was with Naruto, she felt turmoil of incomprehensible and unconnected feelings wash over like a desert sandstorm. Bliss, wrath, sadness. She couldn't explain why she loved him, but she knew she was willing to give up everything she had just for his sake, because he was worth every sacrifice. He was one of the most perfect people she had ever met. True enough, he had flaws and she saw them, but that was what Karin liked most in him. Because Naruto was so real, he didn't play games or hid his imperfections under a mask of hypocrisy like most people did. He accepted them and strived to change. He never thought of people with disdain even when they hurt him. He was naturally kind and gentle, and he took everybody as they came. He didn't ask her to sacrifice anything in his favor, instead he gave without asking in return, and that was what drew Karin to him. He didn't need to say anything or offer her gifts for her to feel good. Just his mere presence and seeing smiles on his face were enough to make her feel complete and fulfilled. This was nothing like what she had felt for Sasuke. It was even more intense and real. It was not a result of long hours fantasizing on the perfect man. This time she saw above the surface. She was aware of the monster, the nine-tailed demon, yet she wanted all of it and more. All she wanted to do now was to spend the rest of her life showing how much love she had for him. Even if she knew Naruto wasn't likely to share her feelings, she didn't care. She didn't deserve him. Besides, the things he did for her were already enough. She didn't need more. He was all she needed to be happy. He was the center of her life. Naruto watched as his wife activated herself over the cooker while she hummed a melody to herself. Her tummy had grown a little bigger. She looked 4 months pregnant. Meanwhile, she was almost getting to her 6th month. Her face looked healthy and a serene glow covered her body. As the day passed, she became more and more beautiful, even more desirable. Though on that part Naruto knew he better laid his hands off. A self-derisive smile spread his lips. He had come back from a mission 3 days ago. Another one in the long lists of missions he'd been having for the past month. It was most likely he'd be sent for another one anytime soon. So he had decided to enjoy as much of her as he could before his next mission. Though he liked the excitement and the action during missions, there were times when he couldn't help but miss home, or to be more precise, Karin. Oh sweet heavens, the woman was his obsession. There were times when he found himself few feet from the enemy camp and the only thing he thought about was what Karin was doing at that particular moment. Even when he was surrounded by a band of infuriated, threatening A-rank enemies, he couldn't help but ask himself if she was doing fine. She was in his mind at all times of the day, and the best thing he liked about missions was when he came back. Not only did he like the familiar citrus perfume that floated in the apartment or the gloss and shine of all the surfaces, it always felt like heavens to soak in the long healing baths she prepared for him. Not to talk of the Epicurean meals that waited to send him to the most exotic settings he had in mind. But above all, what he liked the most was that he got to hear the melodious voice that haunted his dreams. And that smile which said more than words, "I've missed you." Though she didn't voice it loud, Naruto was sure Karin longed for him as much as he did when he was away. At least he hoped so, because as time passed Naruto had begun to develop feelings for her that went beyond duty or platonic friendship. It was even above mere desire. It surpassed everything he had ever felt. He felt possessive and unsecure whenever it came to Karin. He often thought of her as his wife these days and not more like the roommate he was married to. He loathed thinking that one day they might have to part. He couldn't imagine himself with someone other than her. The thought of Karin with another man was unbearable. So unbearable that he had decided he was going to brand her with his mark, show the whole world she was taken and his, and that he belonged to her forever and always. But how could he do that? He couldn't just take a hot piece of metal and apply it on her skin. Could he? No way, it would be barbaric and out of place. This kind of mark didn't have to hurt physically, it had to be heartfelt and beautiful. Even if Naruto wasn't sure there was something with enough beauty to compare with Karin's, it had to be well thought and eternal. Even if they parted, she could keep it and it would remind her of him forever and bring a smile to her face whenever she saw it. But if he knew the effect he wanted it to have, nonetheless, Naruto couldn't figure out exactly what thing could possibly produce that. Naruto suddenly lifted his head up. Karin had stopped singing and everything seemed deadly silent. He furrowed his eyebrows inquisitively, wondering about the cause of her sudden muteness. He was about to voice his question when he heard it too, the shrill ringing of the bell. For a moment he felt like cursing, not very used to this sound. Very few people ever paid him visits. It had been so even before Karin's arrival. He usually went to his friend's home or they met at agreed meeting spots. Most of them rarely took the pains to get this far. Who could that be? Karin murmured, voicing his question loud. She dropped the cooking spoon she held in her hand on the counter and was about to head for the door when he interrupted her. "Never mind, I'll do it." Her eyes fluttered in a very enticing way and a killer smile graced her lips and she thanked him and returned to her cooking. Naruto was happy he was leaving the room for a moment because when she did that he felt dizzy and tipsy with desire. He came back a moment later, a weird expression on his face. "We have some visitors," he told her in a fake cheery voice. Karin just raised an eyebrow, intrigued, but said nothing. She wiped her hands with a dish towel and followed him in the living room. Her eyes took the same dimensions as the saucers she used in the kitchen. No need to say she was as dismayed as he had been when he had opened the door and he had seen the Inuzuka couple at the doorstep. Sure, Karin had told him some weeks earlier about her meeting with Hinata. Naruto could remember feeling happy and relieved she had at least made this acquaintance. He loathed the idea of her being secluded in their apartment with no one to talk to when he was away. But he hadn't expected to see the pearl-eyed heiress and the dog boy, especially in their home. It was obvious she too shared his surprise. Till now he hadn't even been sure the Inuzukas knew his address. Not that they were at odds, but they had hardly been the best of friends either. Kiba didn't do the visiting thing. He preferred they met at places for training or to have a drink. In either case they were usually opportunities for him to compete with Naruto. That was when Naruto used to do the socializing thing. For a long time Naruto had enjoyed the casual rivalry, though he had secretly wondered about its reason until the day he had been invited to their engagement party 3 years ago and Kiba had flashed him a not very subtle triumphant smile. That's when Naruto had understood the source of their teenage rivalry, Hinata. Though Naruto had been surprised since he had already made Hinata understand as much as he appreciated her, he wasn't sure he deserved her attention, needless to say her love, because he didn't feel as strongly for her as she did for him. Obviously it hadn't been enough for Dogboy. Nevertheless, Naruto had sincerely wished them the best in the world and everlasting happiness. Since then, they had hardly met again, firstly because Naruto made it a point not crossing their way in order to avoid giving Kiba the wrong impression, and later because he had not been willing to see anyone after the misery Sasuke and Sakura had inflicted on him. Talking of those two, he hardly ever thought of them anymore these days. He snapped out his daydreaming when he heard Hinata's soft, embarrassed voice. "I'm sorry we didn't inform you before coming, but we wanted to surprise you." "I told you this wasn't a good idea," her husband whispered in her ear. "We are clearly surprised," Naruto whispered before he knew what he was saying. "But actually we are pleasantly surprised, aren't we, Karin?" he asked in a cheesy voice, recriminating himself inwardly for being so tactless. Even if they were not expected, there was no need to be impolite. "Of course we are very happy to see you. Pete, please don't remain standing, have a seat," she stuttered, still not fully recovered from her surprise. At last, Kiba grunted, earning him a whack from his wife and a cornered smile from Naruto. "I'll get you some tea," Karin suggested before exiting hurriedly to the kitchen. Naruto was left with their surprise guests. For a moment they said nothing, then Hinata's voice sprang up. "I hope we are not disturbing you," she said, cheeks red with embarrassment. "We could still go." "Of course not," Naruto cried out before saying in a cooler tone, "as we said earlier, Karin and I are happy to see you. Both of you," he emphasized to Kiba's attention. The latter just snorted as if he didn't believe him. Nevertheless, Naruto continued unfazed. "It's been a long time since the last time I saw both of you, so I haven't got the opportunity to congratulate you for the new addition in your family, so congrats." "Thank you," Hinata cheered as her hand automatically moved to the huge bulge underneath her elegant pearl maternity gown. Even Kiba could not help but let an upward smile grace the corner of his mouth, paternal pride written all over his face as he placed his big hand on top of his wife's smaller one. Naruto could only understand him. He felt the same whenever he saw the swell in Karin's abdominal region, even if he had not yet had the pleasure to touch it. Indeed, the baby was not his, yet he thought of it as his own, and if he anticipated the moment it would arrive, he was also looking forward to it. Karin came in at this moment and placed a tray of tea on the table. She bent down to serve them, but Naruto was faster than her. "Leave it to me. You sit down and rest a little," he whispered softly. Karin was about to protest, but she knew with Naruto it was pointless, so she did as she was told and sat in the couch opposite to their guests over the table. "You should know my wife Kiba, don't you? When were we introduced, if I may ask?" Kiba said in a tone that made Naruto grit his teeth. While he was fuming silently, trying to regain composure, Karin went ahead. "Good afternoon. I'm Naruto's wife, Karin. I was looking forward to meeting you, Mr. Inuzuka," Karin said after clearing her throat. "Your wife made me understand you were a wonderful man. That must be because I am," he said with unhidden arrogance, scrutinizing her with a sharp glare as if he was assessing her suitability to be his wife's friend or not, making Naruto flinch and Karin wriggle uncomfortably in her seat while Hinata just rolled her eyes and shook her head. "It's rude to stare at people," Naruto growled. "That applies for ugly people. But beautiful people are meant to be stared at, and that is exactly what I'm doing," he said, flashing a wide grin to Karin, who was blinking frantically. "I was talking about you in case you were lost. I was looking forward to meeting you too. Hinata was right. You're a sheer beauty and I was wrong, you're nothing ugly as I'll expect Naruto's wife to be. By the way, you can call me Kiba, no need for formalities, we are friends." He extended his big hand that she took with a small smile, her cheeks red and hot with pleasure mingled with embarrassment. Okay, Naruto exclaimed, feeling more than irritated because of this wild man charming and flirting with his wife in front of his own. "I suppose now we know each other well enough. You ladies could go to the kitchen while Kiba and I stay here and have a man-to-man talk. I have nothing to tell you and my wife is not a maid." He was cut off by said wife with a rapid kiss on his lips. Before she struggled her way up. "You're right, Naruto, Karin and I will be in the kitchen. Be good boys, the two of you." With that she left the room with Karin. As they entered the kitchen, Hinata let out a sigh. "You must have walked a long way till here," Karin offered, pushing a chair in her direction and setting a cup of water near her hand so fast Hinata didn't release when she did it. Their apartment was very distant from town. Every normal person would find it far and the trek somehow tedious. She could only guess, given Hinata's condition, the exercise should have been even more strenuous. "Your house isn't that far, I've worked longer distances than that. I'm feeling very fine," she assured, smiling sincerely as she always did. "I was sighing because Kiba exasperates me sometimes with his excessive eagerness." Karin blushed, embarrassed by the show that had taken place in the living room some minutes earlier. "I hope what he told me didn't upset you." "Of course not," Hinata cried out, looking at her as if she had lost her mind. But then she remembered Karin had evolved in a world where possess and be possessed was the bloody modus vivendi. She wasn't used to this type of casual flirting whose purpose was more to compliment and cause pleasure than to seduce to cause havoc. He was right, "You're a beautiful woman and pregnancy suits you well, you're glowing." "Thank you," Karin said, half believing it, not used to this kind of compliment. Sensing her uneasiness, Hinata changed the subject of the conversation. "I was rather thinking about the rivalry between him and Naruto. Are they always like that?" "You mean childish?" Karin nodded. "Yes," Hinata informed. "Whenever those two are in a room, the air starts feeling thick and overstuffed with brooding, misplaced ego." "In that case, should we be leaving the two of them alone?" the redhead asked, feeling anxious they might start a real fight and get hurt. "Don't worry, the worst thing they can do now is calling themselves very embarrassing names." "You wouldn't want to hear that." Karin wanted to tell her there was no word they would say which could shock her, since she must have heard most of them before. Addressed to her most of the time, and she had retaliated to them using even filthier vocabulary. Instead she stayed quiet. There was no need to file Hinata about the worst details in her life. This visit, as unexpected as it was aimed at being pleasure time and not turning into a pathetic heart-spilling exercise. If the two men were going to be fine, so be it. But they better not tear down her living room, if not they were going to have a glimpse of her vast vocabulary in the domain of foul talk. As well as what happened when you stepped on a hormone-overloaded pregnant woman. "Well, in that case," she said with a bright smile, "I guess I can fix dinner in peace. I hope you like meatballs." "Yes, I really hope Kiba and I are not intruding," she asked for the nth time. "No, you're not. Naruto and I often lunch in private, if you know what I mean. It's good to have other people at home for once. It's definitely a pleasant surprise." "Thank you, Hinata." "Why, you're welcome," the other answered, a little bemused before shaking her head and chuckling softly. "You're definitely special, Karin. Only you could make coming to someone's house uninvited a good thing." She fell into one of her contagious fits of laughter, in which Karin followed her, yet unable to figure out while she was laughing. Kiba and Naruto had been alone for some time now when they heard the laughter coming from the kitchen. Obviously their wives were faring better than they did. Naruto, wanting to be a good host, decided to act mature and initiate the conversation on a subject he sensed Kiba liked very much. He cleared his throat openly to attract the brunette's attention, since he had decided looking into space was far better than looking at his ugly face. "Karin told me, Hinata, and you were expecting twins." You must be very thrilled. HNN, you seem cool and relaxed, but aren't you a little nervous? Naruto persevered and he made it. The Inuzuka spoke. Have you decided to change your profession to become a psychoanalyst? Inasmuch as you may think yourself fit for the job, I will never let you come an inch near my mind. Even if it's for free. Naruto was starting to feel unnerved again, but he was determined to behave himself. This dog-scent boy was being a knucklehead, but he was not going to have the better of him. I see you left Akamaru home. Good of you to notice. Why is that? The blonde continued, pretending he had not heard the sarcasm in Kiba's voice. My wife feared he might frighten yours, he answered between his teeth. There was no need for that precaution. Karin may look frail, but she is tougher than that. But all the same, it's very much like Hinata to be caring for others. But you should know that better, you're her husband. Yes, it's my wife. See dude, in as much as I like my wife and I know the long list of her qualities, I'm not going to give them to you. Marriage seems to have turned you into a chatty maiden, but that's not my case. So I'm not going to tell you, even if you live as far as the promised land and your building resembles a wrecked ship. Your apartment is pleasant to the eye and your chairs are comfy. I'm not also going to tell you your wife does an excellent job at keeping it tidy, because this can't obviously be your doing, as well as good tea. So keep your questions to yourself, I have nothing to tell you. For a moment Naruto was puzzled. Though he had made them in his own twisted way, Kiba had actually complimented him. This was one rare occasion he was sure he would have to live for ages before hearing them again. For some reason it went deep into his heart, and for some reason he was angry with Kiba because somehow he felt a little a chatty maiden at this moment. Sure, he said stiffly. They sipped their tea, pretending the other was not there. Some minutes of this stuffy atmosphere, and this time Kiba broke. We don't often see you neither at the training grounds nor on missions these days. Has marriage affected your will to train too? Anyway, you should get back to it, you're definitely looking out of shape. Naruto knew Kiba wasn't referring to his physical appearance while saying this. It was more of the fact that for the last year he had made it a point to avoid contact with everybody willing to lick his wounds in solo. I have been training, but just it wasn't with you. Why? Were you afraid we might kick your ass, or you think you are too far gone for us to meet up with you, hero? I think it's more because of the second option than the first, he said with a cheesy smile, unable to resist to the temptation to taunt his friend. Kiba just snorted. If that makes you happy to think of yourself that way, I won't deny you the only pleasure you have left in your life. It's not the only one. I have my wife too, Naruto said, surprising his own self. More silence fell on the room. This time again Kiba was the first to speak. I meant it when I said your wife is beautiful. I thought you didn't like maiden talk, Naruto said, ironical. I'm saying this just so you should know, when I first saw her I thought she was your girlfriend instead of your wife. Why is that so? Naruto asked, feeling his whole body tense. If the guy dare insult Karin, he was going to break his head, and as lovely as Hinata could be, he won't let go of him till he was a crumbling mess. Then Kiba said what he expected least. There is nothing to account for that. It's not supposed to be stamped on her face, Naruto pointed out defensively. That's the reason for this, Kiba said, pointing the silver band on his ring finger. Naruto was taken aback for some minutes. At the time they had gotten married, neither he or Karin had found it necessary to have wedding rings. Karin was too overwhelmed by her recent assault and the decisions she was to make to give it a thought. As for their witnesses, they were far too busy trying to bring him back to his senses to think of such a tiny detail. As for him, he didn't see the necessity of what he considered like some sort of ornament more than anything. But under the light of what Kiba had just told him, he was starting to think he had had it wrong. Now he could only think of what people could have believed when he introduced her as his wife. They must have certainly thought he was trying to make things sound normal because Karin was pregnant. Now the look the shopkeeper the maternity boutique had cast at Karin's bare finger made more sense to him. She was certainly intrigued by the blatant absence of wedding ring. Had she thought their marriage was pretense too? And all those they had come across, what had they thought? More than what people must have thought. What had Karin thought? At that moment said person came into the room with a tray full of dishes that she set on the dining table at the corner of the room. You may want to know dinner will be served in a jiffy, she said warmly. At last, Kiba grunted again. This time Naruto was unable to flinch even as Karin smiled heartily. Over dinner Naruto couldn't keep his eyes off his wife. She smiled easily to Kiba's grudginess and inquired to know if Hinata was alright or if he had enough food in his plate. She was the perfect hostess, smiling and warm. But there was that moment when Hinata's diamond ring caught the light and he saw the furtive longing in Karin's eyes as she looked at the ring. Then he knew Kiba had been right from the start. Karin cared less about ornaments. In fact, he hardly saw her with jewels, apart from the studs she wore on her ears. But this was more than a simple ornament. It was the symbol she belonged to him as much as he belonged to her. It was the sign the vows they had made were not for fun. Yes, he had strived to be the best husband ever, but as Kiba had clearly pointed out, what accounted for it? Naruto smiled to himself. Who could have known such a tiny detail mattered so much? Certainly not a thick fool like him. But now he knew what he had to do, and he was going to do it not only because it was the right thing to do, because he had found the answer to the question that tapped his mind. By the time Kiba and his wife decided to leave few hours after lunch, Naruto already had a plan forged at the back of his mind. While the women were saying their goodbyes to each other, he gave Kiba a firm handshake. Goodbye. I hope you don't expect me to tell you. Your wife is an excellent cook and that you're a lucky man. Of course not, that will make you a chatty maiden, but all the same thank you, he said with a warm smile. You're welcome, Kiba said stiffly. Hinata and he headed for the door without turning. He addressed Naruto. Blondie, when you gather enough courage meet us at the training grounds, he said mockingly. Sure, was Naruto's casual response. When they were out of sight, he closed the door and walked towards the living room, Karin by his side. Interesting day, wasn't it? He asked. Sure it was. I hope Kiba didn't upset you too much. He was just trying to be kind, she inquired. A little. But that's because he did the things I don't do enough. Like what? Telling you how much you're beautiful and how lucky I am to have you as a wife. Karin blushed. Then I think we should invite him and Hinata more often, she said, looking down to hide her embarrassment. I won't push it that far either, but we never know, I could still give it a thought. Karin woke up to the sound of cursing and yelling coming from the kitchen. Looking at her stand watch, she furrowed her eyebrows. It was 7 o'clock. Why was Naruto awake this early, and most importantly, what was he doing in the kitchen? A feeling of uneasiness washed across her. She got up from bed as fast as she could and marched towards her robe, which hung somewhere. She was about to put it on when she heard a loud boom that should have reverberated across the whole building. Naruto! She screamed as she ran to the kitchen, bare feet, her heart racing like a drum. But when she opened her door, an alarming scene greeted her. A black thick smoke was starting to engulf the whole place, making her eyes teary and difficult for her to see whatsoever. She could hear Naruto coughing frantically, but she could not locate where he was. Naruto! She cried, anguish clearly leaking from her voice. Are you all right? Please answer me. The only reply she got was a more persistent fit of coughing. Panic was starting to have the better of her. For one moment she imagined Naruto in there, asphyxiated by the smoke, laid powerless on the kitchen floor. Without a second thought she entered into the dark, heavy fumes and started shouting his name harder. Still all she could hear was the worrying fit of coughing. Very soon her own lungs started burning and she found it very difficult to catch her breath. Everything was a giant dark spiral swallowing her up. But she couldn't yield to the darkness, not yet. She had to find Naruto and make sure he was okay. She tried to wake up, but her body was beginning to feel numb. Tears started streaming on her cheeks as the feeling of powerlessness crushed her. Forgive me, Naruto. I'm so weak, she whispered before the darkness engulfed her. Karin woke up to the sound of beeping monitors. Her eyes fluttered and opened. A harsh white light blinded her and she closed them back. She could hear many agitated voices spiraling over her head. She tried to speak, but her throat felt dry and her lungs burned a little. Where was she? What was she doing here? Where was Naruto? Naruto! In a painful flash the previous events ran through her mind. She had heard the explosion in the kitchen, the scary smoke everywhere, the frantic coughing of her husband, the darkness that had engulfed her before she made it to the kitchen. Lord, what had happened to him? She opened her eyes, sat up straight, despite the hands she felt forcing her down to bed. A hospital bed, she realized as she saw the people all dressed in white that whirled around her and the scent of antiseptics that hit her in the nose. Leave me alone, she squealed. I have to find him. I have to find my husband. She continued, struggling to be free, nearly ripping off the cables that were attached to her marked arms. Calm down, madam, he's okay, a soft voice assured her, but she didn't give a damn. I want to see him. Where is he? She screamed, her voice almost hysteric. He'd be here in a minute. Just Karin? She heard a soft husky voice call her name. She turned her head in the direction she had heard the voice coming from. Though her vision was blurry because she didn't have her glasses and her eyes still burned a little, she knew he was the one. "Naruto," she whispered as silent sobs started escaping from her mouth. "I thought something dreadful had happened to you. I thought," her voice trailed before she could finish her sentence as tears suffocated her. At that moment she felt his strong hands circling her body as it shook all through. She put her arms around his waist and she held him as tight as she could as if she never wanted to let him go again. "I was so scared when I saw all that smoke and I heard you cough," she choked. "I tried to save you but I couldn't. I'm so sorry." She cried even louder. "It's okay. I'm alright," Naruto assured in an appeasing voice. For what seemed like hours Karin cried both from shock and relief. "You have to calm down now," Naruto said in his soft voice. "It's neither good for you nor the baby." Automatically Karin pushed away as her hands went to her swollen abdomen. "The baby," she gasped as her eyes opened wide. A gnawing guilt tortured her mind. She hadn't thought of it since the moment she had heard the explosion. In her will to save Naruto she had put it into danger. What if? As if he had sensed her fears, Naruto's hand rubbed her arm reassuringly and pushing her slowly into bed for her to rest and recover from her emotions. "Don't worry, it's alright. I was able to bring you here fast enough before anything could happen to it. I'm just sorry I caused all this in the first place." His expression became grim as he said that. Karin put a hand on his jaw. "You don't have to say that. But it's true," he snapped. "If I had not handled the gas cooker so badly all of this wouldn't have happened." He slowly pushed away from her and got up from the bed. Karin watched him walk to the window where he leaned one arm above his head, the other in the pocket. The tension that radiated from his body was palpable. He seemed to be in intense mental torment, and indeed he was. When he had slept at Karin's bedside after he'd rescued her that horrible night, he'd vowed to himself he was going to do whatsoever it took so that she never found herself in such a vulnerable situation. But here she was, nailed to a bed in a cold, sterile hospital room. All because he was so thick he couldn't handle a gas cooker properly. Naruto had always thought he was a health hazard in the kitchen, but he had not known his awkwardness could be this dreadful. If he had known, he won't have tried to fix breakfast this morning. He had realized that for the past days Karin had been getting more and more tired. Come to think of it, was just normal given her condition. The fact she got up early every day to prepare his breakfast before he woke up didn't help the situation. So he had decided from now on he was going to ease her from the burden of making breakfast when he was around. True enough, his culinary prowess was not impressive, but he could at least manage a decent breakfast. Or so had he thought, until the distinct odor of butane had risen in the air and minutes later an explosion had almost turned their apartment into ashes. "Naruto?" He heard her calling his name softly, but he could not gather the courage to see her face. Not yet. He was feeling too emotional right now and he didn't want her to see him like that. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath to cool his throbbing nerves. He couldn't tell if it were seconds or an eternity later when he felt two warm, slim arms wrap around his waist and one soft cheek press against his shoulder blades. He stiffened for some seconds, startled by this gesture, which was as surprising as it were affectionate. "Naruto," she repeated his name with a softness that made his insides melt. "You need to be less unforgiving towards yourself. It was just an accident. An accident which could have cost your life," he exclaimed furiously, wanting to get out of her arms because her tenderness made him feel guiltier by the seconds. But she didn't let him go. "It could have, yes, but thank God it didn't." "What if it had?" he said in a bitter tone. "Then I would have been happy, at least you were safe, because if anything were to happen to you, God knows I'd surely fall apart." Her confession made Naruto's eyes to grow wide. For a moment he thought what she had said was the fruit of his imagination. But her grip around his waist tightened and he could now feel the curve of her stomach carving in his back, and the words that followed were enough to confirm his initial thoughts. "Losing you will break my heart. I'm glad you're safe and sound." Naruto couldn't find what to reply to that. True enough, Karin's words were far from a declaration of eternal love and servitude, but they were as sweet and touching as any tender words he'd ever heard. He couldn't find anything suitable to say before he could even open his mouth to say a word. The door of the room suddenly opened and a busty blonde Hokage barged in. For a moment she stood by the door watching the two of them in astonishment. But her surprise was short-lived. "Though I'm happy you are recovered enough to stand on your feet, I don't think it's safe to indulge into monkey business now," she said in a sly tone that had Karin blushing madly. Naruto just exhaled and grunted something inaudible. He turned around, forcing Karin to slowly slide her arms from around his waist. Naruto couldn't help but feel bereaved. "Ba-chan, what do you want?" he muttered, not happy at all by the fact she had interrupted a moment which could have led to one of the biggest events in his life. "I only want to do my job," she said, unfazed by his glaring eyes. "It's obvious your wife is fine, but I just want to check to be sure given her condition it's safer. That is if you'll let me, of course," she added in a feigned obsequious voice. "Of course," he mumbled, hating the woman for her shrewdness. Nevertheless, he led Karin to her bed and helped her settle down. "Thank you," she still said in the same mocking tone. "You're welcome. I'll leave the both of you." Once he was in the corridor, Naruto let out a sigh and leaned against the wall, still under the shock of what had happened in the room. For a moment Karin and he had shared something he found hard to put a name. He'd felt his heart drumming in his ears and a growing awe and anticipation almost numb his body. Indeed, ever since his discussion with Kiba some days before, many questions had been whirling in his head. The most important being, what were his feelings for Karin? He had thought about it again and again, trying to seek his heart honestly and be true to himself. The feelings the redhead aroused in him were hard to describe. When she was around he felt happy and good, that was true enough. But there was also this longing and sadness that nagged him and made him feel insecure. Insecure because he'd never felt he was losing himself so completely to anybody before. She was the fire that consumed his body and soul. She was the endless waters in which he longed to drown forever. More than lust and passion, he felt he was actually in love with her. He'd never thought he could ever feel that way one day, but it had happened. He'd been trying to fight against the truth ever since she had lit that spark in his, the place of his heart he'd thought will stay dark forever. True enough, at the beginning he had been spurred by the need to protect her, but now it was so much more than that. She had become the essence of his life. For a very long time he had thought himself in love with Sakura, so when she had betrayed him he had felt his heart ripping apart. But now he thought about it, he couldn't say with certainty if he had been in love with her or the thought of loving her. Or if he had felt true love in her arms, or it had been the combination of passion and good that had bewitched him for the duration of their relationship. Anyways, he realized what had hurt him most when they had broken up had not been the betrayal of the presumed love of his life, but losing against Sasuke once more. To think he'd made a fuss over a wounded ego made him feel ashamed of himself, but he had to be true and admit it. If he had once loved Sakura, it was not the case anymore. Now she felt like a distant memory that itched in your mind from time to time but left you untouched when it left. Meanwhile, if he lost Karin, he couldn't imagine how his life would be. Empty and useless didn't even describe the situation. It would be like burning in the blazing flames of hell. No amount of time would be enough to erase her from his mind, no one would be able to rescue him. Perhaps was he a fool to fall in the treacherous nets of love again, but he was ready to hurt, even if it was just to have a glimpse of what it felt to be loved by Karin. Sure, there was still the memory of her assault that hung in the air like the mythical sword, as well as the memory of all the men she had encountered in her life. None of them had left her with a good impression. Perhaps she was going to think he was no different. But on the other hand, deep in his heart he felt she might love him. Perhaps because of the shadows that filled her eyes when he went on missions and the look of longing she gave him when he came back. Or perhaps because of the way whenever they were together, even if they said nothing, he had the impression they were in intimate connection. Furthermore, perhaps the words she had said earlier that made him believe again. "Losing you will break my heart." The door of her room opened and Tsunade came out. She stared at him for a moment before speaking. "You don't look fine," she stated when she saw his tortured look. "But I do feel fine," he grumbled, not liking the sharp edge of her stare. If you say so," she snorted. "Anyway, just wanted to let you know your wife and your baby were fine, just in case you were worried about that." "Thank you. I'm relieved," he said in a monochord voice. "Seeing your face, no one would guess that. That would be because people see what they want to see. Or perhaps because they know you so well, they wouldn't be fooled by your outward toughness that disguises the torment underneath. I never knew you were this philosophical. I'm old enough to be, though. You should know that." If Naruto had not been so deeply tormented at the moment, he would have certainly laughed and teased her at her own admission she was old. Indeed, considering the pains Tsunade went through to conceal she was far from her youth days, it was surprising for her to say it loud so bluntly. Too bad he was in no mood for pranks right now because such an occasion wasn't going to present itself for another while. The blonde woman sighed seeing his irresponsiveness. It was so not like Naruto to let an opportunity to taunt her about her age so easily. He was really tormented. Karin and you are the perfect couple. You both look like you've just been told the end of the world was in few seconds and you still hadn't achieved all the dreams you were aiming for. Except this is not the end of the world and there's still time for you to, if not achieve, try to achieve all what you've been aspiring for. The sooner you start working on it the better. Once again Naruto was startled, this time by the longing that transpired in her voice. Tsunade wasn't the type to let such vulnerable feelings easily surface for everyone to see. Yet she had just done it in his presence. He looked in her eyes and he saw a small gleam of sorrow in her amber eyes. Like that of someone haunted by the past but who had learned to conceal their regrets to the rest of the world. The moment passed rather fast because soon after she was her own gruff self. For the meantime, she snapped surly, "Start by removing that horrifying, pathetic look from your face and get back to your wife. She needs you right now." With that she gave him a tap on the shoulder and walked away from him without waiting for his reply. Naruto stayed in the corridor for a moment trying to pull himself together. He leaned face against the wall and closed his eyes. He felt so tired, so drained. If only he could. This whole situation was taking a toll on him, sucking away his energy. If only he could open his eyes and realize this was just a dream. But he knew from experience no matter how he closed and opened his eyes or pinched himself, the reality was not going to fade away. But damn, a man could hope. If not, what was the essence of life? He was so caught up in his thoughts he didn't hear the rapid footsteps coming his way until he felt a solid hand give him a slight tap on the shoulder. He jumped, startled by the sudden appearance. He turned around to see Ruka-sensei's brown eyes staring worryingly at him. "I came as soon as I heard about the explosion. Are you alright?" Still under the shock of seeing his foster father after such a long time, Naruto was short of words for a moment. Indeed, ever since his wedding with Karin he had only seen the dolphin ninja on rare occasions during which they had not had time to discuss properly. The older man didn't even visit as he used to before. Of course Naruto understood he had not yet gotten to terms with his rushed-over wedding with the ex-rogue ninja, and he didn't hold any grudge against him. Iruka was a very protective person by nature. He held those he cared for in a bubble and sent his claws out whenever he saw someone threatening come near it. Given Karin's past and the emotional situation in which Naruto had been when he had married her, it was just normal. All the defense mechanism erected by Iruka had surfaced. Though Naruto wanted his father to see the goodness he had seen in Karin, he knew it was going to take time and he had let him get over it. In all cases he knew he could still count on his help and support if he needed it, like at the moment. For that he was grateful. "Naruto, are you alright?" Iruka repeated, greatly worried by the persistent silence of the blonde boy. "Yes, Iruka-sensei, I am," he answered in a husky voice. "Thank heavens," the dolphin ninja murmured, lifting his eyes to the sky. "What about Karin and the baby? Are they all right?" "Yes, they are. I was scared the worst had happened," Iruka-sensei said, relief clearly seeping from his voice. "We were not far from it thanks to me," Naruto said spitefully. "What happened?" Iruka asked cautiously, sensing the hurt and guilt in Naruto's voice. Naruto took a deep breath and recounted the accident to the teacher, although the memories still hurt. By the time he finished they were seating on a bench nearby. Iruka placed a hand on his shoulder, his keen eyes boring into his. "The gas system in your building is an antiquity. A fire was bound to happen sooner or later." "Perhaps, but I was the one who triggered it," replied in a bitter voice. "That is fate. I almost killed both of them," Naruto cried. "Thank God it didn't happen. It serves no purpose nurturing regrets and living in the past. It prevents you from seeing what lies ahead." "Perhaps, but how would I have seen ahead if Karin and the baby had not been anymore?" For a moment they stayed silent for a while, both reflecting on the words. Naruto was the first surprised to realize he had pronounced. He could no more contain his feelings, they were suffocating him each minute. Karin had said losing him would break her heart, but did she know loving her in silence sent him to hell? Iruka was the first to speak. "Can I see her?" he asked in a cautious voice. "Why, yes, I'm sure she'd be happy to," Naruto said, clearing his throat to clear away the huskiness. "In that case you may lead the way." Naruto got up like an automat and brought him to Karin's room. She was leaning against the pillows, eyes closed when they entered the room. But when she sensed their presence she sat up and her puzzled eyes went from Naruto to Iruka. An awkward silence filled the room. "Good afternoon Iruka-san," Karin said in a shy voice, not knowing what attitude to adopt. "Good afternoon Karin, it's a pleasure to see you safe and sound," Iruka-sensei said. "Thank you. It's a pity we didn't get to meet under normal circumstances." Iruka understood what she was referring to. It seemed as if the only time they got to meet each other she was both pale and queasy, cladded in shapeless clothes like the day of her wedding, or stranded to a hospital bed like now. "We'll have time for proper meetings in the future. Right now my sole purpose is to verify my daughter-in-law and my future grandchild are all right." He couldn't have said better words to please Karin. A small smile split her lips. "We are both fine," she reiterated, placing a hand over her swollen tummy, in a voice that hid her emotion very little. "That's all that matters." "No, it also matters Naruto is not harmed too," Karin added, looking at her husband who was standing in a corner of the room. "Yes, that too," Iruka agreed with a smile, sending a quick glance in the direction of his foster son. "He told me you tried to save him." "Yes, but he is the one who ended saving me again," Karin admitted, her cheeks red with embarrassment. "That's because it's the husband's duty to do so. And he does it perfectly," she said, looking straight into the blonde's eyes. "I'm happy." Quote. Iruka-sensei then stood up from the chair at her bedside. "I just wanted to check on you three. I'm going to leave you to rest. Take care of yourselves." "Thank you," Karin simply said. "See you. I'll escort you to the door," Naruto said coolly. "I'd be right back," he said to Karin, who just nodded. The words stayed caught in his throat. He just squeezed her hand and turned around. Once more he was in the corridor, this time with Iruka at his side, piercing him with those shrewd eyes that had seen through him so many times. This time again was no exception. "You love her?" It was more an affirmation than a question. "Yes," Naruto simply replied, knowing there was no need to lie. The raw emotions in his eyes spoke for him. "Does she know?" "No." "Then I think the wrong explosion took place at the right time. It's about time you remedy to that situation." You don't need to tell her. You have to do this for yourself, for the both of you." Iruka gave him one more tap on the shoulder before taking his leave. Once more Naruto was left in the corridor with the brooding load of a sense of incompleteness and untold words weighing on his shoulders, crush him down at any moment.
That's all for now. If you want to see next part, then please like this video and subscribe my channel. Thank you.